Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining our stream. I know you were expecting to see Paul and then you get to see me for now, but it's only going to be for a few moments. Since this is going to be the last presentation of Pixologic for 2020, I wanted to take this opportunity and say a few words. First, I'd like to thank you the artist, and all the artists who have inspired us throughout the years to do what we do. Without your work, without your creativity, without your artwork, there wouldn't be ZBrush. Yes, we created ZBrush, however, you the artist, who gave it life. And for that, I and my team are truly grateful. This year has been a remarkable year for so many reasons, one of which is, of course, the pandemic. It has impacted us in so many ways. However, there is a silver lining to it. For me, it is a renewed appreciation for things taken for granted. Renewed appreciation to be able to go to a store and browse without having to think whether I'm going to get sick from it or not. A renewed appreciation to be able to go to a restaurant and dine without having to measure the distance between me to the person next to me dining. A renewed appreciation to be able to shake the hands of an acquaintance or give a hug to someone you care for without having to think about viruses. All this has changed. However, it will be back. It may take months, it may take a year, and it will be back. And once it does, don't take it for granted. Right now, I'm able to broadcast to you from Los Angeles to wherever you are on this planet, in real time. 3 generations ago, this thing would have been considered to be pure magic. However, today, we take it for granted. Go visit ZBrush Central and see the artwork that is posted every day. Fantastic artwork. 3 generations ago, this kind of an artwork would be unimaginable. However, today, most of it goes unnoticed. Take it for granted. Don't take art for granted. If you see something that inspires you, say so. Speak to the artist. Let them know that you've been impacted. After all, we're a large community, and more importantly, we're a family of artists. I promise to keep it short, and I will. So I'd like to thank you and wish you a happy and safe holiday season, and a very, very happy and very safe 2021. Thank you. Stay safe.
Hey. Joseph, you're muted. It never fails. Oh, you're muted again. Now you're unmuted.
I like being muted.
I know. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this special stream. As you can see, we've got a special guest with us, Mr. Michael Popovich. Thank you for joining us, my man. How are you doing?
Of course. Always glad to hang out with you guys whenever I can.
Yeah, good times, right? Ready to go. We've got Joseph Drust with us as well. So we've got a special stream for you all to go through. We kind of want to highlight 2020 as far as development goes and give you guys what's been put in ZBrush this calendar year, especially from version, obviously, 2021. And yes, we'll be going into more upcoming features and things that will be being put in ZBrush. So we're excited to really walk you through some things and show you how the three of us are using ZBrush and how you can use ZBrush. So thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I know we got people from around the world. It's always fun to do these streams. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to be going through each one of us from time to time, bouncing around. And then, of course, as always, the chat is open for business. So please feel free to chat away in there. Myself and Joseph and Michael and many other people from Pixelogic will be in there answering any questions that we can answer for you. Right? So we're happy to have you here. It's been really exciting. So, boys, are we ready? Do you want to get into this now, or anything you want to add?
No, I think we're ready.
Yeah.
I like
Thanks to Michael for joining us.
Of course, man. It's like,
I like the beards. We're going beard style, huh?
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I just took mine off.
Did you?
I didn't get the memo.
You're the clean version. You're the clean version, right?
Oops.
That's the way we're going with this. So we're gonna just start with me, and then we're gonna be bouncing around to Joseph and Michael. But we want to again walk you through some things that again we're gonna be looking at all of this calendar year and all what we've done at Pixelogic and ZBrush, especially from, again 2021 and up to the upcoming version, which you all know now is going to be 2021.5. So stay tuned for more information about that version and also what we're going to be showing you in that version as well, right? So let's get going on this. We'll start with me, and we'll share my screen, and I'll show you guys a little project that I've been working on and having some fun with some of the new features that are in obviously 2021 and also in the upcoming edition. So I just want to walk through some things. I've become obsessed a little bit, I would say, with hard surface, just a touch, right? So I want to walk you through a little bit of a workflow that I would do now with some new things and some additions that we've made this year. So this is just a helmet that I'm working on, trying to come up with some kind of design and elements. So I want to show you where I started with this and how I got to this point. I want to show you a couple tricks and tips that I did to get to this point. Okay, so me, I just started with, awesome, a female head. Ooh, right? So again, I'm just starting with a project that ships with ZBrush. So it's something simple and easy. So I want to create a helmet for her. So for me, I'm just going to append my little handy dandy sphere, okay? And this is what I want to turn into the helmet, right? So I'm going to throw some transparency on so I can see through this. I'm just going to quickly resize this. Like just get a general, yes, there. This is where we all do our best Bob Ross imitation, right? There, happy little helmet, okay? I'm going to come out of perspective mode actually for myself. I'm going to turn on polyframe, and I kind of want to make a helmet that has a certain height or depth to it. Okay, so I'm just hiding and showing a piece, and I'm going to delete that port that I don't want anymore. And so now this is where I want to now start making a different type of design through this helmet. Okay, so I'm going to switch to my ZModeler brush, and what we have here now, the ability is slicing the mesh. So I'm going to just set my brush right now to these modes, as Druss likes to call it, the Slice ZModeler brush, which is actually, we're going to ship a version of that in your upcoming version. So every one of these actions, your point action, your edge action, and your face action, all have the ability to slice through the surface, okay? So now I'm just going to say, okay, I want to make a helmet. I want to go from this point, and I want it to go up to there, okay? I'm going to go from here now to maybe down there. Okay, that looks good. Then I'm going to say I want to go from here. Let's go the same height there. All right. Now on the front, I want to do a little something different. Okay, so I'm going to say I'm going to probably go from here to, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. That's not any good. Let's go from here to here. Okay. So I'm just slicing through areas that I like, okay? You'll notice that the slicing is automatically adding creasing, which for me, I love, because if I'm doing anything low polygon, I want to use some creasing. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to take advantage of some creasing. So I'm going to hold my space bar, and under the point, I'm going to go to creasing, and now we've got shortest path. So this has become really handy for me to say, okay, actually I want from here to be creased as well. And then back here, I would prefer this to be creased as well. So you can see the creasing will go all the way through. So I'm going to say, you know what I want though? I just want to start all over again. So I'm tapping on my space bar to let ZBrush know I don't want to do a continuous crease. Because what shortest path is going to do is when you press once, press again, you can see it just keeps building on top of the points that I've already pressed, right? So I can tell it to, hey, I'm going to start a new area on the model by tapping on the space bar, right? I'm going to do a little mirror and weld. And we have this, and then I'm going to finish off this with that. So you can see these little designs that I'm putting in here. I want them to be like a cutout. So another thing I'm going to add to this is I'm going to hover over a polygon. I'm going to go to polygroup, and I'm going to select the new fill option. Okay. So now I'm just like, give me a polygroup there, and give me a polygroup there. Right. So I'm just slicing, creasing, and then that's created a boundary for me now. And this is amazing to be able to click and add polygroups. And one thing I want to add that some people might not be aware of, in 2021, we gave you guys the ability with ZModeler that it can work on subdivision surfaces. So the only features in ZModeler that won't be able to work on subdivision surfaces now are ones that are affecting the topology. So something like the slicing is affecting the topology. If you're adding an edge loop or you're Q-meshing, that's affecting the topology. But something like I just did right there, that's just a filling of a polygroup. You can actually use that on surfaces that are even subdivided up. Okay, so I just want to add that because that's actually in the version that you have now. So this is the only thing that's important to me is that I'm going to come out of transparency mode. So yes, perfect dome, love it. So I'm going to delete what's hidden there. Okay, now I want to clean this up a little bit. I don't even need the slicing. I was just using the slicing for my design elements. So I'll throw in some ZBrush on this now. I'm going to go symmetrical. And I don't need a lot, so I'm going to drop this down to like 2, right? I'm going to see how, I'll turn on my handy dandy magnifier. We always love the magnifier. It's always handy, right? And then now I'm just going to say ZBrush this. And then now I've got a nice clean topology version of this helmet that I'm starting out with, okay? And then what's been a lot of really handy features for me is within the gizmo. Okay, so I'm just hitting the W key or W, and then hitting the little gear. And this is going to pull up some primitives and some deformers for us. So I'm a big fan of a deformer. Say it with me twice, deformer, right? So this is giving me symmetry ability already. So this cone right here, you can see as I move this back and forth, the dots on screen right are appearing and then disappearing, appearing and disappearing. So when they're disappeared, this is telling ZBrush, hey, I'm symmetrical. So I want you to work symmetrically with the deformer as well, okay? So now I'm going to do something like that, where I'm just unmasking the points here, and then these points are masked. So this is built on a masking system. I gotta cover this one too, because this has become a big one for me. When you guys are holding control and you're doing a mask, when you're using a deformer or something like this, instead of, you look, I'm not holding my keyboard anymore, but my pen's still on my Cintiq. If you hold the Alt key, right, it's going to switch to a white box. If I let go, that's telling ZBrush whatever's now in the white box, stay unmasked, and whatever's outside the box, mask it, right? So if I was to put this, sorry, Dress, I got to do it. I got to, because this has become one of my faves, right? Some of us, I'm sure, are used to doing, say, something like this, and then inversing our masks, right? Now, if you get this, what I'm saying, and you embrace it right there, I don't have to do the extra clicks and things like that. And then it's easy for me to do that same thing without drawing a mask out first and then having to reverse it. Okay. So again, holding control, right, gives us a mask. And now I'm just holding only the space bar, position it where I want. See, hi, mom, hi, dad. Right. I'm positioned here. Hold the Alt key, you get a white box. Everything else masked, but what's in the white box. Okay, so I'm using this to my benefit, right, when I'm in here. So that's how I like to work with my deformers. And now the beauty is, now that I have symmetry, I just kind of reposition the helmet. Yes. Again, we were starting from a sphere, right? And now the next thing that I want to do is, which is very nice, that's you guys have available to you right now, is the dynamic subdiv, right? So I'm going to turn that on. And it's going to smooth out this egg helmet thing that I got going on right now, right? But what I'm going to do now is add some thickness. Okay, so instantly I start getting that thicker helmet, right? So we can control our thickness. Oh, yes, that's ginormous. Okay, so you can do like that. And one thing I want to point out with this feature as well is you have an offset. This is important. So right now my helmet is coming off her head, right? If I want to do the opposite, I want to start going closer to her face or her head, or maybe do 50-50 or whatever you might want to do. That's why there's this offset slider, right? So if I go 100 offset, then the whole thickness is shooting outward, okay? 0 is at 50-50, and if I go negative, then I'm going completely in. You can see now the helmet is getting really close to her face. So I'm going to do a little bit of a negative, not all the way 100. So I really like this capability because I can see what this is going to start looking like on her right out the gate using this. Now, the other thing I want to point out for this is the post subdiv is really handy. So if I turn this off, you can see it instantly rounds out, kind of softens all my edgings, right? Which this is pretty extreme. Like I know I'm extreme, but I don't need my models to be extreme, okay? So then I would click that off, and now that's kind of softening my edges. So in essence, what I'm telling ZBrush to do is do my thickness, then divide it. I'll turn on my magnifiers, then divide it by 2, okay? So this is, I'm happy with this. This is great. This is where I want this, all right? So I can say apply now, and now this is applied as real divisions now. So it's no longer dynamically, it's real divisions, okay? So what I want to do now is do another thing that I find very useful, building upon something now that I've already started, to start getting a little bit more complex and go a little more detail oriented here, right? So I want to start using a couple features together here. So for the sake, I'm just going to duplicate this, okay? And I'll turn this helmet off, okay? The one that we've been building, all right? And I'm going to delete my lower subdivision levels, okay? Because what I want to do is I want to use an insert mesh brush here. So B is what I'm pressing, and then I, and then I'm going to go to this brush right here. So there's IMM primitives H. Okay, so that H stands for half, right? So every mesh in here, it's only half of the mesh, okay, in essence. And you can see there's a primitive one next to it. That's the difference between those two, in case you wanted to know, all right? So I'm going to click on this, and at the end, our main man, Joseph Drust, added a plane here. Thanks, Drust. Okay, so I'm just going to turn on symmetry so that I can see both sides of where I'm going to be sitting in space. Okay, and then now I'm just going to draw out a plane. Yes, beautiful. Okay, and what we have here now is this plane drawn on this helmet that I just kind of duplicated, right? So the only thing I really care about now is this plane. That's it. I don't care about anything else. I just want this one plane to work with. So I'll turn on polyframe so you can see it's one polygon base. All right. And now I don't need that helmet. I was only using that helmet to draw on really quick. Okay. And now I'll turn on that helmet that's below. And so you can see this is the actual helmet that's going to become my main piece. And now I'm just creating another subtool. So what I want to use now, again, is that handy dandy dynamic. So I'm hitting the D key to turn it on. And again, I want to come into this, and I'm sure a lot of you have been using this thickness. And I want to put, again, a little offset. Let's go with a -50, okay? Let's go there. And I'm going to turn on post subdiv this time because I want this to kind of be more sharp right now is what I'm looking for, okay? And back to ZModeler, right? We'll switch back to that brush. And this time, I'm going to use the extruded options. And what I'm also going to do is turn on my snap to surface. And now I'm just going to build something really quick across. Yeah, there, yes, right? So the beauty of this is I'm dynamically seeing everything happen. So if I do want to adjust any of my offset, I can and see the resulting of that offset. Okay, what's going to be a quick tip for you guys, besides having the extrude snap to the surface, I would also recommend switching to your move and also changing this as well to snap to surface. Okay, so that way you guys can click on the points as well. So we can start doing things like that, or I can click on a point and then see now it's closer to the surface, right? So the original points weren't sitting on the surface, and now they're sitting on the surface. Yeah, there, happy little trees. Okay, so you can quickly adjust things and move things around and start working like this. Okay, so what's really beneficial for me also, and what's a great way to work with this, is over here in the subtool menu, these little icons right here for each subtool, right? I'm going to turn on subtractive, right? And I've got live booleans turned on now. So if I turn off my polyframe, you can see I'm cutting into the surface now, right? And so I can see how much is that going to cut into the surface and actually adjust this on the fly. And so okay, it's a little too much, and start adjusting things on the fly, right? I can find the thickness that I want. Actually, I like 100. And I didn't even know that, right? Until I did this. Okay, and then you can turn off live booleans, see what you're doing, turn on live booleans, and see how that is affecting your surface, right? And I can keep adding some smoothness to it. And there you go. I'm kind of making a design. So I really like to work this way because it's like a non-destructive way of looking at this, right? And, you know, don't forget that when you guys are also going to do an extrude, there's multiple ways to extrude. So I can extrude out one edge, right? Or I can extrude an edge loop or even a poly loop, right? So I'm just tapping the Alt key again. So this is one edge, this is edge loop, and then I hold the Alt key for a poly loop. And it's telling you up here, and you guys might need to be aware that up here in the top left, it's telling you, okay, what you're doing. So this is kind of the way I went for doing this helmet. I just started doing, we'll come back to this, right? And tell it, all right, this is what I got. We don't need to see that other one that I have, all right? So this is what I have going on throughout the model, right? So here, we'll look at just the helmet. And then here's where I'm at, right? And as you can see now, all this cutting into the surface is using what I just showed you, okay? So, and then you can see I got different things happening throughout the helmet. So I just wanted to share that workflow and highlight some upcoming features, like the slicing and the creasing path, but then use some of the things that we've released this year in 2021 with that dynamic thickness thing is a huge one for me and been really, really helpful. Okay, so that's it for me as far as this segment right now, showing you guys some of those tips and ideas of what's coming to you and what's already available to you now. So we're now going to transition and we're going to hand it off to Mr. Michael Popovich now. So Michael, are you ready? All right, so we'll hand it off to Michael now, and I'll jump in my chat window.
Yeah, so we had one question first. We had some questions about which space mouse this is. So it's the Enterprise Edition, but ZBrush, that's one of the things that 2021.5 will be supporting is the space mouse. And so you don't need to have the Enterprise, it will work with the other versions of the space mice as well. All you, Mike.
Cool. Oops, sorry. There we go. So actually, just kind of show you where I'm headed with this. This is the final product. And, you know, I have the old sizzle video that'll take you through the process in a couple minutes. And we'll try and recreate this in my usual 4x speed manner, but also using a little bit of the 21.5 functionality here. So, you know, when you're first starting out, you may go in and grab your clay buildup brush and start, you know, maxing out your volumes here and just trying to get a craggy look. However, it's a little bit difficult even with that brush alpha to go through here and start getting like a cliff, kind of a cliff feel going. So what I like to do is go in here to, let's go ahead and back that out just a little bit. So again, go through here, start blocking out your shapes and forms. And if you need a little bit more control over like that hard surface feel, I like to grab a couple brushes out of the light box. So it's just the comma key on your keyboard. And then you can go in here to your brush menu and then, or the brush tab. And then we're going to go over here to trim. And I'm going to grab a couple brushes out of here. One of those is the trim hole, and then hit the comma key again to bring that back up and then grab that trim smooth border. For both of these, you may want to put that square brush alpha in here. So I'm just going to go, here's the recently used brushes. I got my brush docked over here. So you just click that, double click that divider here, drag your brush menu over to the left. And then you've got recently used brushes here. So here's trim hole, trim smooth border. And then with trim smooth border, you again, with that square alpha, you can go through here and you can start, you know, let go of all, you know, when you hold down And this particular brush, since it's at the Z sub, it's going to kind of push in to kind of a craggy surface, and you hold down Alt and it'll kind of pull up to a craggy surface. And this is going to follow the surface normals. So if you want to do like cliff faces, you can, as long as your surface normal will let you do that. But you can't really pull out striated rocks, but you can certainly go through and just start adding detail. And I've got this just set to a Dynamesh here. Let's go to George geometry. You can tell I use my custom menu a little bit more. Dynamesh here, and so you can set that resolution. It's fairly low res. We're just trying to get a feel for these rocks here. But if you go over here to trim hole, how this is going to act is if you set your camera and if you hold down Shift and just kind of snap and rotate your camera here. So if I snap it to the front here and I start using this brush, it's going to, again, Z sub is the default. So as I Z sub back, it's going to push straight back. If I hold down Alt, it's going to pull straight forward. And again, let's throw on that square alpha so we can kind of start brushing in some of these cliff sides here. So if I go to the top, I can hold down Alt and kind of pull up, and then next to it, I can kind of pull up, and then maybe not as much. You can see I can start building in a little bit of cliff faces here. So again, I can re-Dynamesh. I can go back to my trim smooth border with my square alpha, and we're getting some nice kind of cliffy things going on here. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the skull. Now, this skull is just something I had from a previous, on my YouTube channel or whatever. There's a mechanical skull series, and it starts with this kind of just organic skull block out. So I figured since I had this laying around, I may as well use it. So again, I've got my Dynamesh resolution set fairly low. And then we have, again, our trim smooth border. Now on this one, you're going to see I get kind of thin in here around these T's. So if I was to go through here and pull this up, it's going to pull the rest of that geometry with it sometimes. So what I'm going to do is go over here to brush, auto masking, and I'm going to turn on back face mask. In fact, I use that so much, I have a little indicator in my menu here, so I can just do Alt F to turn that on and off for whatever brush I'm using. So now what I can do is I can go through here again with trim smooth border with the square alpha. We're just going to go through and just kind of make this look a little bit more rocky, kind of go through here and kind of start diving into these volumes here and kind of crunching them up a little bit, giving it like a, I don't know, my concept may be a little bit muddy. It's supposed to be, maybe it's kind of, is it sculpted? Did somebody go in here and make this? Is this a natural formation that just happens to look like a giant ape skull? Who knows? Maybe not the best concept artist in the world, but we're going to make it look very, very naturalistic. So if it has been sculpted, it's been sitting there for a while. Now that I've done that, what I can then do is I can start adding striations. However, on this one, if I go into like my clay buildup, for instance, I do want this to kind of follow the mesh. But as I build this up, you're going to see it kind of overrides the underlying detail. So I don't want to get rid of this detail. I just want to kind of push and pull those details back a little bit. And we're going to get heavier into this. But one way you can use this new feature, this thick skin over here, is to do just that. So if we go in here to thick skin, you're going to see the thickness is going to be set to 20 by default. And you basically just click and drag this and set how deep or how shallow you want these to go. So for instance, I'm going to take this up to say, I don't know, around, well, maybe not that much. We're going to say maybe 6. So that's going to set it to 6. So now when I go through here with my clay buildup, if I start using it, it's going to act like the clay buildup. But as I press harder, it's going to pull up to that 6 level. Actually, we go a little bit thicker than this. Let's say 9. I can hold down Alt, and that'll basically push that pre-existing detail back, and then I can let go of Alt, and I can pull that pre-existing detail forward. So that way I can kind of get a striated look without losing all the detail look that I had going for me. So I can kind of build in a little bit of that rock formation into this mesh here. And I can do the exact same thing if I Alt tap over here to grab this subtool here. You know what, let's do just a little bit more of that kind of craggy surface. In fact, we can even go through here. Let's crank that Dynamesh resolution up just a little bit here. And we go through here and let's say we've already got a lot of nice detail. Let's pretend like I did some really nice detail here. And again, you just want to push this or pull this around as you're doing your cliff faces. Because we already know right now, if I go to the trim hole, I can go through here, and as I pull this up, and let's switch this back to alpha, it's gonna obliterate my detail. However, if I turn on thick skin, and it's set to 80 right now, so you can give it a lot of leeway. Like if you just want to do a little bit of detail, just dial it up a little bit and give it a little bit of kind of minimizing the effect of the brush. And as we go through, we're going to be doing a lot of presentations on using this for other purposes. So this is just one of them. But we can go through here and I can crank this up to like 130. And now as I use this trim hole brush, you're going to see it's going to trim hole. And then as it hits that cap, it's going to bring that detail right along with it. So again, if you already have cool details in your mesh, you can push down and pull up and not lose any of that detail as you kind of go through here and start modifying these cliff faces. And another really cool thing in 2021.5 is under deformation here, you're going to see a contrast slider. So you can crank up that contrast, or you can go the opposite and kind of smooth stuff out. So it's kind of like a built-in polish right here. So you do have polish deformations up here, but now you have, if I go hit B to bring up my brush menu, we're going to have, and C to narrow down to my C brushes, we have a contrast delta, and then B, C, E will grab contrast target. So now I've got those in my recently used brushes. So now I have that functionality built right in here. So I can very quickly go through here and say, as I'm using contrast delta, the more I brush over a surface, the more it's just going to kind of build up. Contrast target, as long as I don't lift up from my keyboard, it's only going to brush to that amount. And that amount is basically whatever this contrast slider kind of maxes it out at. Now, as I'm adding this contrast, it's bringing a lot of micro detail with it. So what I want is to get more of a craggy type look, really emphasize the flats and the little cracks inside the stone. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take the Z plugin here, go in here to Decimation Master and hit Preprocess Current. The cool thing about this particular tool is you only have to preprocess once. So once it's done figuring it out, which boom, we're done. I can go through here. Let's turn on Polyframe and maybe Skin Shader 4 so we can see a little bit better. Control W to make this all one poly group. And we can go through here. I can knock this way down. I can hit like 5 enter, and that's going to be 5K polys, and hit decimate. That's going to drop it way down. Or I can go up here and I can type in like 150, enter, and then hit decimate, and it'll be 150. I'm going to look at something around like maybe 40K polygons. And what that's going to do is these broad open surfaces aren't going to pack that much detail, but then wherever it has a lot of that kind of seam detail or cracks where the surface changes happen very suddenly, it's going to build in more polygons there. And what that's going to allow me to do is when I run that contrast now, it's going to give me a very stony, craggy look. So you can kind of use your contrast slider now to give you that stone effect and really kind of punch those broad surfaces. And of course, this is still a Dynamesh resolution or a Dynamesh mesh. So just control drag, re-Dynamesh your mesh, and then you can go right back in with your thick skin if you want to. You say thick skin, let's say maybe, and again, you can tap this and just drag it back and forth. You'll see there's a little slider above that'll give you fine-tune control, or you can just type in a number, say 3, and then go back in here with your clay buildup, grab another brush alpha, and then you can go through here and you can kind of punch in some detail. And of course, while you're doing all this, now that I think about it, there is a new preview AO. You can turn that on and you can change the intensity of that AO, the quality of the AO, and while you're sculpting, it'll update on the fly. So at the end of the day, let's see if we can pull this in here. And again, we can just have the AO turned on here, and let's switch back over to something a little bit lighter. So you have the AO on there, and then again, if you want to, you can use your space mouse and you can go exploring around that mountain you just made, go and see what's up here. And again, I haven't been using this a tremendously long time, but it's actually become a little bit second nature to me. If I can turn it towards myself a little bit. There we go. So you can kind of go through here, and this is kind of universal. So anybody that supports this mouse, you can use the same space mouse to go through and navigate, and you can kind of zoom around and use this to sculpt and model and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think that's it for this section of the presentation.
All right.
The Fireball Island game. You have like a little thing on the top and you had a little ball and it would go down. It'd be a good version of it.
How many people played that?
Everyone
out there.
I think I had like 2 friends that at least had it.
Yeah. Michael, did you play that game? Do you remember that game? Fireball
I'd
Island?
have to see it. I'm not sure if I'm totally
It's kind of got like an Indiana Jones type feel to it. It was this big hunk of like vacuum formed plastic. And then you had like little marbles that would roll down. They knock out bridges. And
I do remember
different
that.
people. Yeah.
There you go. That was a fun
Yeah,
game.
they did remake it.
Mousetrap
Someone in the
where
chat
you're going
mentioned it too. They did a re-released version not too long ago.
All right, so let's kick it to Mr. Joseph Drust. He's got some more stuff to share with you.
So buckle up. No. So we had a lot of questions about the Space Mouse stuff. So this is the enterprise version of the Space Mouse. We were giving some of these away during the summit this year, which was only a few weeks ago. We've been busy this year. Busy. So as Pavlovich was going through, it's it's really quite fun to use. And the main thing when you're kind of doing it is the benefit that I find is this kind of rotation and zooming at the same time. And so as you play with this, you know, I'm just moving my one hand. Like, look, this hand's over here doing nothing. And I can just zoom around and move in and kind of pinpoint different areas on it. It reminds me of I keep telling Paul, it's like I'm in Flight of the Navigator and I'm just flying the ship. So it's interesting. It's definitely worth checking out. And if you haven't used one before, I'd definitely try it because it's pretty fun and it gives kind of a new feel to navigation inside of ZBrush. I'm enjoying it. So one thing before I get into what the heck this sculpture is I'm showing, Pavlovich had that little icon on his screen where we're showing if you had backface masking on or off. So this is just the button that lives over here in Brush Backface Mask. So it's right here. So when this is on, you can see it's highlighting, and when it's off, it turns off. So if you want this in your UI, you can just come up here to the Preferences tab, go to Config, do Enable Customize, and then go back over here, and then find that little button and hold Control and Alt, and drag that sucker, and you can place it in your UI. And then we go back to Preferences, turn Customize off, and now when you enable that backface masking, you see it's going to glow nice on your screen here. So it's already in there. We had a question that you guys should add that. It's there. You can put it wherever you want, and as long as backface masking is enabled, you'll see it update and glow on your screen there. So just one little thing that I wanted to hit that I saw in questions you guys had. All right, so 2021 was, you know, 2020 has been a crazy year, and this version has improved a lot of stuff in terms of some of the functionalities and things you can do now. And so as Paul was mentioning, we kind of want to hit on, you know, the whole release cycle for 2021. We had the summit a few weeks ago, and so we want to just kind of recap on those and show some more artwork that's created with this version and also the new updates to 2021.5. So here I have a little tree here, and I'm not quite sure what I'm calling this yet. I think Paul was calling it like the tree of life. I was calling it like a family tree. And basically after we started messing with thick skin kind of stuff, started bringing back some of the old elements. I know Pavlovich was going to mention this too, where just going back and looking at old assets and seeing what we can do with the new tools. So this one in particular, I had one that was like for sculptures that I was messing with. It was a ball and then a hand was growing out of it and it turned into a tree. So I kind of went into that kind of frame of reference when I was kind of designing this. So I just want to go through the process of this because I used some of the new features in here to kind of describe these things. So first I started off with, you know, just some simple heads here. And the idea I started with was some sort of almost like remembrance or some sort of things where you have like, could be yard art basically, is what I was kind of going into. And with this, you know, I just come over and say, grab my, you know, standard clay buildup. If I'm doing soft stuff, I usually shift to a different alpha when using the clay buildup brush. So this is primarily my main sculpting brush for a lot of things. I usually keep it with the harsh alpha, which is that square one, but I do shift to like alpha 6. And then when you use this, it's going to give you kind of a softer feel to it. Now, as I'm doing this, I can smooth this down. And one thing you'll notice is I'm getting this kind of contrast that's happening here. And this is because I'm using this new preview AO. So if I turn this off, you can see this is what I'm kind of getting on the models there. And then with this option on, I can kind of see a little more of how that sculpting is following the structure or the surfaces of the mesh. So this is handy in seeing like if areas have like pixelation or maybe not enough resolution. And it gives you just kind of a new view or feel on your models. So you'll see I have this hotkeyed to a hotkey here. I can turn it on and off. And when you all get the version, if you want to find out where this is, it's just in the render tab. And there's a preview AO area here, and you can enable this on and off. And then you can adjust the intensity and also the different qualities of how it's going to display on your mesh. But it gives a real nice result. And you know, as you're sculpting, you can see this AO, and it's going to make that mark, you know, a little bit stronger, a little bit more visible, so you can see how it's truly affecting the surface of that model. So as I was doing that, I started bringing back into like a hand shape. So I went to kind of this version of the model here. And this is almost in like kind of like you're holding masks, or I've been reading some books to my children, and they're ones about like ancient Greek and the Romans, and they talk about like Mother Earth and things like that. So I had that kind of idea in my head too, where having, you know, Mother Earth is, you know, coming out, and then it's like having faces on it. You know, it's basically the birthing of people from the Earth potentially. So this is where my brain goes when I start when I start doing stuff. And so after I got to this stage, this is when I started thinking about those trees and the limbs, and then maybe having something more growth, more coming up out of these different elements here. So I went in and started making some trees. Now, inside of ZBrush, my preferred method of kind of sculpting or designing trees is using Z-spheres. And you can do these by hand by just adding a Z-sphere and start growing Z-spheres out of it. There's also a really great plugin called Z-Tree, and that will allow you to generate trees from a Z-sphere with just a few clicks of the buttons and some sliders. So if you need to make a lot of trees, I highly recommend grabbing that plugin and making them in ZBrush. So I went through and did, a few different versions of the trees here. So just kind of different elements on it. Now I didn't go all out on the trees because I like getting like the initial state. And then I want to go in and kind of switch this to a mesh and play with it a little bit more. So after I have my Z-sphere tree here, I'm just going to come down to the bottom and open up the adaptive skin tab here. And then in here, I want to just make this adaptive skin. So when I hit A on my keyboard or click this preview button, this is going to show me what this mesh is going to look like if it was converted from the Z-spheres to geometry. Now, by default, you're going to have Dynamesh on when you do this initially, and this is going to give you a Dynameshed version of the model, so you can go actually right in and start sculpting. But if you want more of a lower resolution version, just turn preview off, set that resolution slider down to 0, and then when you turn it on, you're going to get more of a low poly version of that tree there. After you're happy with that, you can make an adaptive skin, and now it's going to come up here and live at the top. Now at this stage, I wanted to add a little more variation, maybe some more limbs, do some different things with this. And the functionality I do for this, I'll usually just divide this up. So I'll go to the geometry tab here. I'll divide up a few times just to smooth it out. And then I'll come over and say, grab the snakebook brush. And so Snakehook is one of my favorite brushes, especially when using it with Sculptris Pro. And by default, when you use this, if you grab the surface and click off, it's basically going to use that snake hook and it's going to try to follow the camera plane. So as I'm doing this, I can pull off more limbs, but you see they're going to follow that camera plane. So wherever I do this, I want to make sure I've got like enough topology, pull off, and it's going to follow the camera plane. Well, there's a secondary snake hook brush here called Snakehook 2. And the Snakehook 2 brush is going to look at the surface normal. So it's going to look at the normal, and when you actually sculpt on this, it's going to pull that out facing that normal. So if I aim my tree here and then do some sculpting, you see it's going to pop it off that normal, and now it's going to generate a branch like that. So I can use my camera axis to kind of determine, okay, how do I want this limb to be applied? And I can sculpt it off, and it's going to start generating like that. I can also just come across a surface, say something like this, and pull it off and start generating like this. So you can go through and start generating a little more variation to these trees. So as I'm coming through and just using this Snakehook 2, I've got Sculptris Pro turned on, and I can start adding more limbs to my tree. And this I find just a little bit faster sometimes. Instead of using Z-spheres for everything, you can just convert it, get your base shapes for that tree, and then go in and manipulate it this way. Now, in addition to this, another brush that I have to hit on is the spiral brush. This is another one of my favorite ones that I go to quite a bit. And this one's going to allow you to kind of add some more variations to your tree. So if I come across here and then just add, let me get my draw size a little bit here. Come across and just click a little, you can see I can start getting these twists. Right? So this is just going to spiral that form there, and this is given more of that kind of crazy branch that was happening off. And so in the tree I had, the final one, you can see this is in quite a bit of areas where I went through and just hit it with the spiral brush just to give a little more kind of undulation or different assets style to the tree. Now you can use this in two ways too. So if you just do it normally, just click and drag, it's going to go in a clockwise motion. But then if you hold Alt and click, it's going to go in a counterclockwise. So you can kind of spin it both ways using that spiral brush. So another little thing there when messing with trees. Now, the thing that gets back to the 2021 version is we introduced this dynamics panel. And this is another great panel for just adding variations and different things to your models. So with things like trees here, there's a lot of cool things you can do with dynamics. So I'm going to come over here and just going to Z-remesh this down right now real quick. So I'm just going to run this and just apply a Z-remesh here. And this is basically just going to take the model that I tessellated up, which is a little bit high right now, and it's just going to reduce it down to a little lower polygon count. So this is going to make the dynamics work a little bit more fluidly, so it doesn't have to battle with all that topology. Now with this tree, I can come through and I can start using the dynamics. So if I just apply this with just normal simulation, this is all default settings, and I just click one, it's going to take the model, and you see it's going to collide with the floor. It's going to give me these wrinkle or dynamic effects down here, but you're going to see a lot of change up at the top. But this is just taking the gravity and just shrinking it into the ground. Well, if I want to add more style to this, I can enable this liquefy button. And liquefy, what it's going to do, it's going to look at surface details on your model that may be out of the normal. So if you have, like, think of it as you have a straight plane and then you have some undulations and some divots, liquefy is going to find those and it's going to start the gravity from those areas. So with this tree here, you can see all these little low spots and high spots and things that I have that are making up these branches. So when I turn liquefy on and now run the simulation, you see all these are now going to start to be affected. And this is giving you now this more like wicked looking tree, right? So all these branches are kind of like doing this stuff that's kind of like creeping in. And so now I get this kind of style. And this is something that would have taken quite a bit of time to go through and sculpt and figure out. But just with a simple click, I can come through and now I have a tree that has a little more contrast, a little more life to it. It's not as static. And so this is a big thing that I've been using a lot of the dynamics with. Now, another fun thing with this is that you can just change the gravity too. So right now the gravity is set to this up and down position based on my screen. But if I flip my model over and then now click the set direction button, now this is going to be the gravity area and this is going to be the top. And so if I flip my tree now, maybe apply some masking to protect an area, and now run that simulation again, you're going to see now the tree is going to grow upward. And so now I'm getting kind of that opposite effect, and now I'm getting a more like a Dr. Seuss type tree is what I kind of envision this as. So all these little stringy parts through there. And then finally, with the dynamics too, you don't have to use just this simulation property here. You can also control it a little more manually, and that's with a different transpose line. So we have our standard transpose is what we use most of the time, but we also have a cloth transpose. So I can take this, and then when this is being used, it's going to use those dynamic simulation properties. So if I scale up or down here, let me zoom in a little bit here, you're going to see it's going to perform that transpose functionality, but it's going to be respecting those dynamics. So this will allow me to get things like squish trees and all sorts of different things, and I'm controlling it manually. So as I move it around, I'm modifying the tree and using those dynamics. And if this is in normal transpose mode, it just gives you that normal kind of process. So there's two transpose lines inside of 2021 that I use primarily, the main one and then this one that will allow you to use the dynamic functionality and generate cool stuff. Now, one more thing with the tree, especially if you have a low res version. So here I have the tree basically when I just converted it to that adaptive skin, is that I can go through and I can apply nanomesh to this tree and then still deform it with those deformers, with the transposed cloth brush, with any of the other sculpting brushes inside of ZBrush, and have that nanomesh follow the surface. So here I just have a piece of bark. So just a simple piece of bark here. And I'm just going to come over here and convert it to a insert mesh brush. And then I'm going to just convert it to a nanomesh brush. Now, the nanomesh brush will allow me to go to this object here that just has polygons, and I can replace every polygon with that piece of bark. So if I just click and drag and then hold down Shift, this is going to look at the poly group I have. And if I turn off my polyframe here, you can see all those polys there now have that little piece of bark sticking out of it. Now I can come down to the nanomesh area here, and I have a preset that I've already kind of loaded here. And I can change these sliders, and you'll see that the tree is now going to have this bark-like effect. Now this is still that same low-resolution version of the tree. It just has these nanomeshes applies. So now I'm adding more life to this tree as well. Now I didn't use this on the final version of the model I sculpted, but if you are doing trees or forests or anything in these real quick stuff, you can use this. And then once again, this all works with that simulation. So as I run it, you'll see it's going to take place. And then once again, you can come through and say, use any of the cloth brushes. So maybe like the cloth hook brush, and you can actually start deforming this and moving it around. So if you need some really cool antlers really quick, this is a great way to kind of do it. And then you can also come through and add that nanomesh on top of it to get that kind of pattern on the surface there. So you can see if I turn it off, you know, this is what it looks like. But with that added nanomesh on top of it, now I have a more interesting design or shape. All right, so that's how I did those trees. And then if I go back to my kind of project here, let me close my panel over here. And so I came through and started adding trees to my model, and this is what I ended up with. So these are all the trees, and these are all separate elements. So if I come over here and just switch to the Gizmo 3D, you can see I just generated the trees separately, and then all I did was position them, right? So I just positioned them into the area I wanted them to be. Now, also when I was doing this, I came through and made a little border area that kind of engulfed another part. And you can do this with Sculptris Pro. So I have this on, I can come through and just sculpt on this. Let's say that clay buildup brush again. And then I can switch to that snake hook brush. And then with this, if you hold down Alt and then click and drag, it's going to allow you to use that snake hook brush, and it's going to follow the surface of the model. So you can see I can hold down Alt, click and drag, and this is now going to follow the surface of that structure. So this is a handy thing if you want some overlapping on designs. It gives a nice kind of like wrinkle or splatter effect, like if you're doing blood or some different FX stuff for monsters. You can definitely use that and just switch to the snake hook brush. I enable Sculptris Pro, hold down Alt, and then click and drag, and it'll allow you to kind of overlap those structures. So after I had those overlapping, I went to the version of my tree that looked like this. Now, one thing when I was in here, you can see the model now is, it's pretty heavy. I'm at 2.6 million polys. And so all my sculpting I've been doing recently is usually always involving Sculptris Pro and using pretty much clay buildup. So anything I'm doing form-wise, function-wise, I've been kind of converting away from subdivisions unless I really need them, but I'll do pretty much all my designs and different things with Sculptris Pro. And the one thing about this is it's very freeing because I don't have to think about the topology. I can just sculpt and it's going to give me the result I want. Now, one thing with this, since this model is pretty heavy here, you can see Sculptris Pro is coming through and it's working perfectly, but it's not as fluid as it is if I disable it. And this is because this mesh is just heavy. Like I'm at 2.6 million polys. Well, in 2021.5, we've added the functionality where we can now use Sculptris Pro with hidden geometry. And so what this means is that I can just come through and take my select lasso brush, just isolate a part out, and now zoom in. And now I still have Sculptris Pro enabled, and I can come in and sculpt now, and it's only looking at the amount of topology I have visible. So it's kind of like Sculptris Pro mixed with kind of like HD geometry kind of process. So you can come through and start using this, and you're no longer limited to, you can keep that model pretty heavy all the way through and just isolate out where you want to sculpt. So this has been a huge thing for me for just coming in and just manipulating different parts of things and then keeping that polygon count, high overall. So I don't have to come through and decimate my model anymore to get under a certain count. To have Sculptris Pro be really, really fast, I can come through and now just hide a part. And now I'm going to get that same speed benefit with Sculptris Pro. And then after I'm happy with that, I can bring everything back and I have my entire model. So that's changed my entire workflow using Sculptris Pro with visibility. Now with this model too, I didn't want to go through. I started going through and manipulated the sculpturing details on it manually like that. So isolating apart sculpting, isolating apart sculpting. But that's a lot of branches. And so what I switched to was the thick skin option that we added. And this is by far one of my favorite things for adding surface details to a model. And it's giving that kind of traditional feel, traditional sculpture look. And so the things I've been experimenting with in this version is just trying to stuff that's, what you'd see kind of in an art gallery or in a museum, stuff that, would be bronzed or maybe cast or molded. And so this kind of effect of using thick skin has been giving me a lot of cool results with that. So as Michael showed, so if I go to the thick skin slider here, I can enable this. And one thing to remember with this is when thick skin is enabled, it's storing the kind of state of your model right now. So it's remembering the state. And this is a key thing to note. And while it's stored, if I come over here and change the thickness, as Michael was showing, and this is going to determine how thick that skin is going to be. So for this part of the model, I had two areas that I was concerned with. I had the branches and then I had the faces. And I didn't want their skins to be the same thickness, right? So I wanted the faces to have a little bit less thickness and the tree branches to have more thickness. So I wanted to make sure I kind of kept those two different because I wanted to be able to see the structures of the faces, but then see the bark kind of aspects of the tree. And so when I merged these together, I did them with the Boolean process. And so this gave me two polygroups. So I have a polygroup from the face and the polygroup from the tree. So I can apply masking now on those faces and bring everything back out. And now the faces are protected. So now I come over here and select that thick skin clay brush. And now I can come through and I can start using this to sculpt. So as I drag my brush out here, it's looking at that thick skin there. And now I just come through and I can start tracing those forms using my 3D mouse over here to kind of zoom in and around. And this has been really nice in this kind of thing. So I'm an alt-click navigation. So before using this, this is what my kind of rotation process would be, right? So Paul always yells at me. But this is my rotation process normally. And so now with this, it's actually more fluid. So it's not as, distracting, I guess you could say. So now I can just rotate around, find the areas I want to go to, zoom in on those, add my sculptural details, and just continue sculpting. Now with the thick skin too, you can see I'm using that preview AO. So this is what it looks like without it, right? So no preview AO. And then with it on, I'm just able to see those marks I'm making a little bit better. Now as I'm doing this, you can actually do it pretty quick, and it's going to give pretty good results. I came through and tried to get, kind of little areas where you'd have, say, like knots. So still kind of bringing in that tree. And I almost transformed the hand to be more tree-ish rather than hand. So I wanted more of that kind of bark structure going through there. So I came through and just did a lot of this. And this will work on everything, even these little tiny things over here. You can just kind of go through and sculpt on them, and you'll add that different spot. This also works with visibility. So I can hold Control-Shift, isolate a part out, come in, apply that thick skin through there like this, and continue working, and then bring everything back. And if I want to change the thickness anytime, I can do that as well. So as long as I haven't unselected the thick skin button, if I find that, hey, that wasn't really thick enough, I can come over here, increase this, and now if I come back in, now I'm going to get a deeper skin result. And so if I wanted to get that really nice bark structure through there, maybe a little bit deeper, just increasing the thick skin is going to give me a different feeling now to that thick skin. And then after that was done, this is what I ended up with the trees through here. So you can see I went through, added those different elements there, kind of tried to get the whole tree in that kind of consistency all the way through. And you can see a lot of the areas where I had that spin or spiral brush, and then some of the other elements with the dynamics. And then after that, I needed to get the faces. So I unmasked my model there, went back to that thick skin slider. In here, I set the thickness lower because I didn't want it as thick. So something around maybe 10 or 11. And then now if I come in and sculpt on these areas of the model, you see it's not going to be as thick as the rest of the tree. And then I just came through and started polishing these. The thick skin works really well for even getting little details like, say, irises. So if I just come through and generate just a little circle sculpt, it gives me this iris kind of shape. And then if I brush the lids in one direction and the other direction, it kind of cuts it back down. And this is all kind of non-destructive. So if I come through here, I can scrub it all out. I can come back in and do it again. And it's been really fun just using this, because if you find out you don't like something, you don't like some area you've done the thick skin on, you can just scrub it out. It's like a wet.
Oh, looks like we just lost Joseph. All right, we'll switch to me. I want to cover some things real quick anyways. Joseph will log back in. You can switch to my screens. There's a couple questions that came up. Number one, I want to cover, someone was bringing up adding models and other models and things like that from different projects into one. You can do that already with ZBrush, actually. There's a couple of ways that you can do things. So number one, I want to call out, and this was also part of 2021, actually, is load tools from projects. So if you're a person that's making a lot of projects, and then there's certain tools that you want to bring in, right, for your projects, you can do it that way. So instead of loading the whole project, it'll only load the tools. So that's a handy way of loading tools from that way. Now, the other thing that I want to call out was asking, well, I'm making things in different tools and different areas. You guys can append or even insert multiple tools, OBJs, ZTLs, ZTLs, STLs. I get used to the ZTL, STL. Okay, so in the plugin menu, right, Subtool Master, you have the ability right here, multi-append and multi-insert. So as long as you have something selected, you guys can bring in as many tools, and it'll automatically append or insert them. So we got the dress back. We can append.
I did. Something happened.
You kicked the cord, didn't you, dress? So you can just click on this, and then your Explorer window will open up, and now you just choose whatever you want. And you can click multiple STLs, multiple tools, okay? So you can click on whatever you want. So you can see here, I'll bring this over. You can see right here, ZTL, OBJs, even Maya files, GoZ files, and STLs. So it's another really good way for you all to bring multiple things that you're working on, and you want to bring them together in one character, as an example. Okay, so that's the way to go. And then also, in the when you're coming in here and looking at other ways to add things, You can do projects as well. So in the file, there's also ways to load projects through here too. So in your Lightbox. So, but I usually use a multi-append or multi-insert to do things like that. Now, the other thing somebody was asking about for retopoling really quick, and then we're gonna kick it to Michael. So one thing to keep in mind here with the ZMolder extrude option, right? So again, I can go single edge loop, right? If I tap the Alt key, it switches automatically to edge, right? And then this, so one tap is just, this is just an edge, right? This is an edge loop, and then this is a poly loop, right? So when you're pulling on it, this is snapping the surface, but you can see the surface obviously has a bigger change than what I'm making right now, okay? So one thing, again, I want to call out on for this is this slider right here. I find this very useful, especially for the thing that someone was asking about it, trying to draw things out, multiple faces. And again, of course, this is going to snap your vertex points together for you while you're drawing. I like to turn this on. So this is going to say the number of rows when I go to extrude the edge that I get. So by default, right, this is set to 5. So as I go, you can see I'm actually getting more topology. So if we turn off the solo, so you can see I got more spans of topology through there. And because, right, because I have turned on snap to surface, all those spans are actually trying to snap to the surface, as you can see. And you can see this is now trying to snap to the ear, because that point right there is sitting on the ear. Now, the last thing I want to show you, and then we'll kick it to Michael, is when you guys are doing this, you guys can actually adjust this on the fly. So you can see I'm actually adding and taking away spans right now. Okay, so if we go back into this, you can see now my slider's sitting at 25, and it was sitting at 5 before. I'm doing it on the fly. I'm not going and changing that slider. I'm just doing it on the fly. So I find this very useful. So maybe for the person that was asking, this might be useful for you. Okay, so again, you just click, and if you hold the control key and then just move left to right, you actually change the number of spans that this extrude is going to have that's snapping to the surface for you as well. And again, we're highlighting things not just in 2021 right now. Joseph with the thick skin and many other things, and the Sculpt's Pro ability to only look at a certain mesh, now it's unlimited. Just go. The constraint to the Sculpt's Pro now is only based upon whatever you're showing, right? And then your system. So the piece of geometry and then your system comes into play now. And it's not looking at the whole mesh when you're doing that anymore. That's the benefit of the upcoming feature. All right, so I just wanted to share those. Michael, we'll get back to you now. Continue to regular programming show. Are you ready, Mike? All right, so we're going to kick it over to Mr. Michael Pavlovich now to show you guys some more stuff.
Cool. So like Joseph was saying, hey, I've got these old projects. So anytime a new ZBrush feature comes out, I always try to go through my old stuff. And especially this one, anything with skin or creature skin or poorly done cloth, which I'm an expert at, I went through and just tried to play around with them. And this is a really good candidate of just a creature and a little bit of iffy, weak creature details and cloth. So I'm going to kind of give this guy a little bit of revamp using the new tools, and it'll actually go pretty quickly. I think you'll be impressed with how fast you can kind of pump up the jam on your old projects a little bit. There was a question in the chat that was talking about, is there a way to kind of use the cloth deformation to wrap around an object? And you can just set a collision volume. So I wasn't going to get a dynamics this early, but if you go in here and just set a collision volume, anything in your scene will become a collision volume. So you can use this. I have some videos that are like, you can take an entire body topology and use collision to kind of jiggle it into place around a new high res, or take a face topology and wrap it around another mesh. But that's a really easy way where you can kind of, wrap cloth around there. But let's get back into this real quick. Oh, anyway, we have an old project here. So I'm going to say Alt Tap on this head, and we've already talked about this a little bit, the contrast delta. So again, B for the brush key, and then C for contrast, and then delta and target Y and Z. And then you also have the slider down here under deformation. So deformation contrast, you can crank up your contrast, or you can do the opposite and polish it down. So in this case, if you want to kind of localize that, you could go through here and you could say, hold down Control and like mask out an area, and then Control Tap to invert that mask. Or like what Paul was doing earlier, if you want to use mask lasso, hold down Control and then Alt, and then you can just very quickly isolate this, and then just wherever you have it unmasked, it'll go through and add contrast. Another thing you can do is localize that with a brush. So again, let me open up my brush menu here, and then here's my recently used, so contrast delta and contrast target. Contrast target's just going to go to a certain amount and then stop. You have to lift your pin up and then go back over this, and it'll continue to add contrast, whereas contrast delta is kind of like clay buildup, where it'll just keep adding contrast until you tell it to stop by stop brushing. So you have that, and so you can very quickly go through here and just, if you need it to read a little bit better in Engine, or you're 3D printing this model, just going through here and just adding contrast is super easy. But even on creature skin, we were talking about cloth a little bit earlier, you can go through here and you can add contrast, but it's not really changing these eye bag wrinkles. So we can actually use a little bit of cloth deformation for that. So going back up here, and if you missed this part, so dynamics menu, just click that little white arrow and drag it over here into your little docked area. Just double click these arrows here, and you're going to see here's our dynamics menu. Just default settings. We'll go ahead and turn our collision volume off because we don't really need that anymore. And we can go through here and use our cloth brushes. So like a B, C is our cloth brushes here, and then we can use like K, which is cloth hook. And if I use it now, you're going to see my polygon count right now is a million or so, and so it's not going to really behave correctly because our max simulation points is set at 250. Now, 250 is plenty. I don't need to crank that up. If I really want to like deform cloth in a certain area, just go through here, hold down Control Shift, and then grab at select lasso, and just grab this area. Now your total points is 155, well under 250. And now you can go through here and you can use cloth hook to kind of push these around. Now these wrinkles are too fine. I don't need little tiny wrinkles. And I could go through here in the firmness and I could crank that up to, make it a little, the cloth a little more bunchy, but what I can also do is just drop the resolution. So if I go down here and say drop this down to subdivision level 4, now I'm pushing very few polygons, and with this, it's going to allow me to kind of just move these bags around. And in fact, while I'm doing this moving cloth, I can go through here and I can say maybe add a little bit of expand. I'll turn the expand amount down just a little bit. So while I'm moving this, the cloth will actually expand as I'm adding more wrinkles. So I can go through here and I can kind of just go through here and just kind of pull up some of this. And if I hold down Control Shift and tap and bring my entire model back, this entire model set at subdivision level 4 is only 83,000. So that's easy enough to kind of go through here and really just kind of just add some of this wrinkle detail. Now you're going to see I can go nuts with this. Like I can just push this willy-nilly and it just does whatever because I'm not limiting it. But you do know by now, if we go over here to our, let's see, thick skin. So the new feature 2021.5 is you can turn this on and that's going to limit the effect this is going to have. So if I really limit this, we drop this down to like maybe 7. It's going to behave like skin over bone. So you can see I can kind of pull that skin over the bone. And if you want to preview this, by the way, see how it's kind of alias there because it's a little bit low res. Just go in here to your dynamic, turn that on. We'll say smooth subdiv of 1 preview. So this is what it would look like with those big wrinkles previewing over your mesh. So you can actually use this instead of using a collision volume, like, okay, I need a skull underneath here and then slide skin over that. Just use skin thickness to limit the amount of the effect that cloth is going to have. So you can very quickly go through here and just kind of, bunch up these wrinkly areas. And this isn't really like contrasty. This is actually adding better and more wrinkles into your mesh. Now, of course, when you're done, let's turn off dynamic, go back to subdivision level 6. You've added more wrinkles. And now if you want to go in here to like, again, brush contrasts, let's say contrast target. Now you can go through here and just kind of pump up the jam on your new eye bag wrinkles. And the exact same thing goes for, like I said, it's really poorly done cloth. So if we go through here again, BCK, we'll drop this down to like subdivision level 3. You can go through here and add some cloth. Again, go through here, add some thick skin, and just kind of push along there. And in fact, you can use any brush in ZBrush as a cloth brush. You don't have to go to their cloth brushes, although they're great. You can go in here to say BCI, brush pinch, BPI. And if I just use it as is, we'll turn off the thick skin for now, it's just going to behave as a pinch brush. However, if I go over here to brush and under elasticity, you can turn this up and you're going to see simulation iterations. If I crank this up, that number is going to tell me to use 100% of the simulation iterations I have in dynamics. So now when I pinch, it's going to treat this like a cloth brush. And if you wanted to kind of really bunch up in there and add really heavy wrinkles, you can have that expand turned on, or you can just go through here and just kind of use this to dial in some wrinkles. And if you go vertically, it's going to kind of pinch those wrinkles in that direction. If you go horizontally following this, it's going to give you wrinkles in that direction. So you see very quickly, I can go through here. And again, just make this cloth a little bit better than the poor cloth sculpting that I did previously. And exact same thing down here. All you got to do is drop this down to like subdivision level 4 and go through here. And let's go back to BCK, brush cloth hook. And again, we want to limit it because there's something in there. It's just cloth draped over a form. So again, go in here, grab that thick skin. Let's dial this back a little bit. And then you can just push, maybe not that much. A little bit of wiggle room here. So now you can literally just kind of push this cloth tube around that underlying form, which doesn't really exist. It's just this form smaller, and it'll kind of update on the fly very, very quickly. So let's see here. Oh yeah, and then on these wrinkles right here, again, if it's not quite enough, and also remember, just in case you're just joining us, that we have the new preview AO. You can turn that on and off and dial that in as intense as you'd like. So it's real time. So if I want to go through here, grab, once I've made the wrinkles and I get it in, and let's go back up here to subdivision level 4. And it's like, you know what? The wrinkles are good. I just want to pop them a little bit more. I don't need to make new wrinkles. I just want to add some contrast. That's when you hop right back into that contrast brush and just go in here and again, pump up that jam. 90s kids will get what I'm talking about. And go through here and just, do it to your heart's desire. And you also have a polish brush, kind of. You can hold down Alt and just polish this back, And also, once you've set that skin thickness originally, you can go back and just wipe away what you've created. I have it off right now, but I'll show you another example of that later on. That's all I got for this particular walkthrough.
All right.
And looks like I'm up again. Oh wait, no, I'm not.
Now we're gonna go head to Drust here in a second here. So
okay, good.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good on that segment. We're gonna go into Drust here in a second. Again, people, to highlight what Michael's bringing, because we're seeing the chat. It was really blowing up. You guys asking a lot of questions, which is great. Think about this dynamic. Like Michael was using it there for wrinkling, like a skin. There's multiple ways to use it. In fact, Joseph's going to show you guys even another way to use it here in a second. So it's not just about using dynamics for cloth. There's many ways to go about doing this. All right. And again, to highlight, yes, the mouse that we have here, will be officially be supported with the next upcoming version, which is 2021.5, which we are highlighting things in this version right now and more. Right. So Drust, I'll give it back to you. Give the conch back to you.
Pass it back. All right, so one quick question here. We had some on like the AO stuff. So the AO lives in the render palette here. So I'm just going to dock to the side so you can see this. You have a varying degree of quality. So if you're working on a high density model, you can reduce it or increase it depending on how much quality you want while it's processing the AO. You can just turn it off. This will work with all materials. So it doesn't matter what material you have. It's going to look at the surface of your model and apply that AO. You have intensity slider, which you can change. And this will allow you to increase or decrease that. So you can really crank it up if you want a different result for your model here. You also have a secondary radius, a blur factor as well. So you have a bunch of different control over this preview AO. And so just toggling it on and off will give you that kind of different feeling. But it's not restricted to a certain matte cap. It's not restricted to anything. It's global. So if you have it on, it's going to do it. If you have it off, it won't use it. And so that's what that preview AO is that lives right there. So another kind of example of, more traditional-ish kind of sculptures here. So this is one I was messing with. I had an idea in my head, kind of an anxiety or oppression or something like that. And so I kind of sculpted this one, once again, using that preview AO, using that thick skin. So her body and her shirt were all covered in that thick skin. And you can see as I can come back across this, I can modify this on the fly and change that. And this is all that thick skin. So I can rough up areas, kind of figure out, what I'm kind of looking for. And one thing nice about the thick skin is you can go back and forth too, and you'll get, it's kind of like cut in, cut out, and it's going to allow you to get, heighten or come across areas and enhance them. You can get like little lips of stuff on the surface. So it's a really fun one to play with. So definitely it's been a huge changer in the kind of things I've been doing. So after I sculpted this one, once again, thinking about kind of installation stuff, pieces, museum things, things like that. This hair was all done with dynamics. Same thing. And also, you can see the occlusion volumes on this too. So if I hide the base here, you can see this was actually generated with the dynamics. So I had fiber mesh that I used with dynamics, and then just had that scene set up with those collision volumes. The fibers just flowed right over the edge. And then I manipulated them with those cloth brushes some. As Pavlovich showed, all the brushes can be used with the dynamics. You just have that little slider that he was changing, and that will determine how much dynamics is used with that brush. So as he was showing with the pinch brush, you can come in, hit that slider, change it, and then you can now use the pinch brush with the dynamics. So lots of flexibility with the dynamics. It's not just for cloth. So that's the main thing there. So as I was working on this one, I added some chains. And so this is where I kind of got to that anxiety. This was my idea. I wanted some sort of like breaking free or coming from the underneath of this. So like fighting out of these kind of chains. And so for these chains, I wanted to show just the processes I used on this to kind of generate this effect. So your standard ones that you can do, most people do, is say I come over here and I'm just going to create a IMM chain. So here I have a chain here, and I have it set up in 3 polygroups, and I can now turn this into a brush. So I come up to the brush palette over here, do create insert mesh, do new on that. It's going to give me a new insert mesh object, which I can then come to the stroke area over here, turn curve mode on. I like to do lock start and lock end. This just keeps those 2 starting points and the starting point and ending point locked, so then I can manipulate the curve in the middle. And then I can go back to my model, and then I could switch, positions like this. I could set my brush size, which I know this chain wants about 50. And I can click and drag across the model, and this is going to start generating that chain. And when I'm doing this, the IMM is looking at what is visible. So when I sculpt, it's looking at the depth information of those models. And this is allowing me to trace across the surface with those chains. Now, I could have gone through and made all my chains this way. I had a bunch of them there, and then there was a bunch of tricky things I wanted to do with this. Like I wanted it wrapping around different things. I wanted it flowing out and under. And a lot of that would have taken quite a bit of time for me to come in and kind of manipulate those curves manually. So what I did instead was I went back to my original chain file, and I made a version of the chain, and I set it up for use with micropoly. So micropoly we added in 2021, so this year, and this will basically allow you to take a piece of geometry and you can then replace all the polygons on a subtool with this piece of geometry. So it's kind of like micro mesh, it's kind of like nano mesh, but it's doing it dynamically. So it's using the dynamic subdivision option inside of the geometry palette, and we can take this object and apply it, and it's going to replace everything, and then we can still sculpt on that model, use all the dynamics, and get really cool results. So with this chain here, most of the micropoly stuff you'll see will have effects where this part will be repeated sideways, left and right, up and down. So you try to get holes on your mesh so they all weld together. Well, with the chain, I only really needed it to weld in a vertical format. So that's why this model here just has the top and the bottom cut off. And then to give an example of how this kind of works, so I take this model and you just want to make sure that it would weld together. And then as you duplicate this down, you'd end up getting a chain. So this is what I was generating with this micropoly. Now, after I have this micropoly created here, this little part, I just need to save this. And to save this, we just need to come up here. I'm just going to clone it. So it's its own tool. So it's the only thing living here. And now I can just save this into our micropoly folder. So I'm going to navigate to my programs files here and go to Pixelogic, and then to the 2021 Live directory and micropoly. And then in here, I'm just going to save this. So I'm going to save it as micro chain. And that's pretty much it. So you could take an object, you just kind of want to size it to a square format basically, and then you want to save it out. And now if I come back to my, so we're going to get a plane 3D object, and we'll show you how this works. So with the plane 3D object here, you can see it's made up of all these little squares. And so if I apply that micropoly to it now, it's going to fill a chain all over the place. Well, I don't want a chain all over the place. I just want it in a strip. So I'm going to come down to the initialize tab here. In here, I'm going to change my horizontal divide to 2, and then change my horizontal radius to around 3 or 4. Now, the goal here in me manipulating this plane 3D object is I want to try to get the topology of this strip to be as square-ish as possible. Because basically, I want all those little squares to be replaced by that micropoly that I just generated. And then this is going to give me this nice chain strip. So after I have that set, I'm going to come up here and make Polymesh 3D. This is now going to give me this as an object. And then now, if I go to the geometry tablet, tab, and now go into dynamic subdivisions, and now activate dynamic. I don't need smooth subdivisions on, so I'm gonna turn that off. I'm gonna go to micropoly, and you'll see now in here, I should have that micro chain micropoly. So you can do this during your session with ZBrush. You don't have to restart, you don't have to relaunch. You can just save all sorts of micropolys out, and then as soon as you come over here and click this, that micropoly is gonna show up. So I can now select this chain, and you'll see this is the result I'm getting right now. So every single one of those polys has been replaced with that chain. I can now perform a rotate to rotate it in the right direction. And now I have a chain that looks like this. And this is all living in micropoly world. So it's a dynamic object. Now what I can do with this now is say I can take it, let's rotate it in 90 degrees and then just turn on the floor here. Let's move it up a little bit. So now I can use this with the dynamics. So I'm going to open up my tab over here and close render and get back to my dynamic palette. And first we're just going to use this with normal gravity. So I just have gravity turned on. I don't have my alliteration set high. Michael was just showing that process over there. And if I just run simulation, you're just going to see this is what's going to happen, right? So it's just taking this and it's just dropping to the ground. Now what it's actually controlling is the strip of topology. It's not looking at the chain, it's controlling the strip of topology. And since the micropoly is turned on, it's giving you the illusion that you're controlling the chain. So that's one thing to remember while I'm doing these things here, is that the micropolys, the piece of geometry you're affecting is that strip, that simple polygon strip, but it's looking like it's this complex chain. Now with this, I can add that liquefy to it. Now I've shown you the liquefy with the tree, and this is going to look at those surface undulations on the model, and it's going to start generating the gravity from those areas. So think about having this model underwater, how it would affect if it was floating underwater with gravity. So it's not just going to fall flat, it's going to end up adding like this kind of little effect to it. And so I can come through and now say grab the cloth hook brush and just modify this a little bit. So let's say I want the chain to start falling from the middle. I can just move this down, and now if I have liquefy on and I turn it, you'll see now the chain's gonna fall like that. So it's no longer falling just kaplunk. It's now pulling that middle part, and then these are flowing in, and you're getting that nice chain effect. Now I can do this in any direction, so I can put it over here, and now you can see it's gonna start that simulation over there, and now the chain's gonna end like that. And once again, this is just manipulating that single strip of topology. It's not the whole chain. So it's just that topology right now. Another thing you can do with this is I can use masking. So I can come through and mask this. Once again, I'm masking the polygon that's driving this micropoly. And then if I come over here and apply that, you can see now that masking is going to kick in, and it's now going to respect that and hold that part in the area. So this is a key function here, using this liquefy and using the masking along with the dynamics, which is what's going to get me to this next step that I want. So instead of doing it in this single plane, what I did was I created a chain, and an IMM part that I wanted to base that chain on. And so this is the part I created. So it's kind of a curl is what it is. Now you'll notice that I have the topology on this, very similar to that strip where I was trying to keep all these polygons to be in that square format, because I don't want really much distortion on each chain link. Because remember, it's going to replace that poly. So if the poly is really long here and then it's really short here, that chain is going to look different here than it does here. So I kind of want to keep that topology similar all the way through. Now, if I turn on my micropoly here and just select that back one, you'll see this is what I'm getting, right? So it's following that curl all the way down, and then I get this result. So I want to use this as a placement object to place on that model of that girl that's on that stand, and then use this to generate that chain effect. And I'm adding this curl in it to give this liquefy some information so it can liquefy it. If it's just a straight thing, you saw it's just going to fall flat. But if I put those kind of areas around it that are going to distort, now the liquefy is going to take hold of those, and it's going to start distorting it and giving that really cool effect. Now, another thing you'll notice here is that I've applied some coloring to this part too. So most of this model here is filled with white, and then I have a little bit filled with black. And this is because I want to use it for masking. So I can take this and embed it in I can embed the color into an insert mesh part, and then use that color to apply masking. And then I don't have to go through and mask all the tips where I stick these things. So I'm just going to turn this into an insert mesh brush. So brush, create insert mesh. And now I've created an insert mesh on that. Now I'm going to go back to my file here. I'll turn off floor. Back to my girl here. Now I want to draw these out on the model here. Now, since I have coloring in this insert mesh brush I created, I want to make sure that coloring comes through. So I want to first come up here to the RGB slider and turn this down to 0. If this is at 100, it's going to use the color that's selected over here. If you have it down at 0, it's going to use the color that's embedded into that IMM brush. And so since I embedded color when I created it, I want to make sure that it pulls the color from the IMM part, not from what my UI has. So I just set my RGB intensity down to 0. Now when I draw this out, I'm going to draw it out, but they may come out at different sizes. So if I draw this, and then I draw another one, it may come out at different sizes as I draw these out. So what I want to do is I want to use the process when you draw an IMM part out. If you hold down the control key, this will snap it to your draw size. So I know from doing practice runs on this demo that my draw size is going to be 300. So if I set my draw size to 300 and now come across the model and click and drag and hold down the control key, this is now going to snap to that size. And now if I just come through here and turn on my dynamic and select that micro poly option again, you can now see that I've taken that and I've appended it to my object here, and it's drawn out, and it's drawn out that curl, and then it's got micro poly on it, and now it looks like this. So now I can come through and just add these a few more times to different areas where I want these chains to be connected on my model here. So I'm just moving around, holding control, dragging this out, and this is just adding these chains. So now I have a series of chains that are connected to that board. Now after I have this, I talked about that masking. So right now, if I just run this simulation, it's going to take all the chains with it. So it will spiral up with that liquefy. It's going to get that cool effect, but it's also going to pull them off the bases. Well, I don't want it to pull off the base. I want those anchor points to be there. So this is why I painted them black. So when I insert them into a model, instead of having to coming in and manually mask these, especially if I have a lot of these, I can now come down to the masking area. And in here, we have mask by color, and I can do mask by intensity. And since that model was filled with black and white, it's going to use that color contrast, and it's going to mask by the contrast. So if I do mask by intensity, these areas that were painted black are now going to be masked fully, and then the areas that weren't painted black do not have masking on them. So now I can bring back my entire model. I can now set a collision volume. So if I come over here and activate this, now once again, the collision volume is going to look at any subtools that you currently have visible that are not the selected subtool. So I have my IMM chains here, and then I have the body and the base. So when I click this button here, it's going to look at the body and the base, and it's going to create a collision volume from those two subtools. So if I click that there, this is now going to generate that collision volume. And now I want to set my direction to be inverted gravity. So I'm going to rotate the model upside down again. I'm going to set direction on that, rotate it back up. Make sure I have that liquefy turned on. We can see the difference here. If I turn it off and click it, this is the simulation I'm getting. So it's expanding, it's growing those chains up, but you'll see none of this up here is changing. So it's basically coming up, and as it's growing, it's going to start unraveling, but it's not giving me that crazy liquefy, right? And so if I turn liquefy on and now do it, you'll see now it's doing this kind of snake-like effect. Let's see that again. Oh, look at that. And this is giving more kind of control for those chains as they're coming up. So if I wanted this model to be suspended from the ceiling, that's a quick way to do that. I want the gravity to come back down though. So I just kind of wanted to throw them up in the air first and then have them fall down. So I'm gonna come over here and do set direction again. This is gonna be now the inverted option, and then run my simulation. You can see they're gonna fall down. They're respecting that collision on my model, but they're kind of going all over the place. And so if I decrease my gravity strength, I can definitely control this a little bit better. And the slower it will be, it will catch on more of those surfaces as it's falling. And then this could stick around the model. But I wanted a little more control than that. So I switched back to that transposed cloth brush. And now I can come through. I still have that liquefy set. I still have my collision volume set. And now I can start using this. And as I use this, it's going to start deforming those chains. Now remember, once again, it's really just deforming strips of polygons. So if I come back here and turn off dynamic, and let me just turn double on so you can see this, this is what I'm deforming. And then I just have the micro poly turned on, and that is giving the illusion that these are chains right now. Now, after you're happy with the result, you can always come up here and click apply, and then it'll remove those polygons and just give you that micro poly asset. So it's really cool to get this stuff. Now, as I'm doing this, you'll see it's going to collide in this vertical fashion. But one thing that's nice about the transposed cloth is you can start using any of the options that are on the Gizmo 3D. So I can start performing a rotation. And as I perform this rotation, it's now going to start constraining or colliding with the object here. And so as I do this, I can start getting this twist effect. And now I get those chains kind of doing more of those things that I kind of wanted them to do, where it's, wrapping over the model there. And so I can start doing this and get that kind of fine control I want out of this. You can even rotate sideways. I can move in screen space. You can do all sorts of things, scale up and down. And then after I'm happy with the result wrapping over in certain parts, I can run the simulation again and then just have them fall on the model like that. So all sorts of fun stuff you can do with the dynamics. And that's the main kind of elements I did with this model to get a lot of those chains. Now, in addition to the chain thing here, we've also added in 2021.5 is we've added the ability to use Curves Helper. And Curves Helper was a plugin that existed on ZBrush Central. It was really cool for using stuff with Z-spheres. And now this is included in the default version. So for this, let's say I have my model here. And let's say I want more fine control of those chains. So the dynamics is pretty cool, the IMM is pretty cool, but let's do a third way on how to get these chains generated. And say I want these chains to wrap around certain areas, maybe go in and out, but I want more fine control. And so what I can do is I can come over here and I can just append a Z-sphere. And with my Z-sphere object here, I can switch to say move, scale, or rotate, scale this down a little bit. And then what I like to do when I'm using Z-spheres is I'll start from like one position and I usually try to hide the main sphere in something else. So I'll take the object here, maybe turn on my transparency, and then just move it into the surface somewhere. So I'm just hiding it in the base of this model. Now after I have it hidden, I'll add one little part of it. I want to make sure I don't have symmetry turned on here. So just add a little starter point by just holding Control and dragging. And whenever you draw a Z-sphere, it's always going to come off the Z-sphere that is selected. So you can see this little circle right here. That's where my next Z-sphere is going to start from. Now, if I have other subtools in my scene, oh, I got a drink of water. Pause for a moment. It will now apply snapping by default. So what this means is I can come over here, and if I click and drag, it's going to take that, create a new sphere, and it's going to snap to the surface. So I can click and drag, snap there, click and drag, snap there, rotate, click and drag, snap there, maybe rotate more like this, click and drag, snap there. And you can do this process now and generate where I want these Z-spheres to go. So I'm just snapping around the model. And this is going to allow me to get positional areas of where I want these Z-spheres to go. So I can have more control over this, wrap it around the entire surfaces of the model. Once again, wherever that circle is going to determine where that chain starts from. Now you'll notice as I was doing this, I was kind of going a little bit crazy. And so my Z-sphere is all over the place. Now you can constrain to the previous Z-sphere size by holding down Control and then clicking on a point. But also now, if we go to the tool palette or the transform palette, or not even the transform palette, the stroke palette, in the Curves Helper area, this is the thing that we've added into 2021.5, there is a scale Z-spheres to draw size now. And this is really handy after you've made a mess, just like I did over here. So I can come up here and set my draw size to say something like 10, and then now go into stroke, do scale Z-spheres to draw size, and it's going to take all those Z-spheres and now scale them to that size of 10. So now they're not all over the place in terms of size, they're all one size all the way through. Now I can manipulate these Z-spheres now, so I can move them out of the body a little bit. We don't want them going all over the place here. I can add more divisions into these certain areas. So I may want to add the chain doing some more there, may pull that out, add some more, just a little more points. And then I can use move to come through and manipulate these. So get them out of the surface. And this gives you quite a bit of control because I'm not, battling with the, trying to get the dynamics to do exactly what I want. I can do it for certain things and have it collide and get nice results. And then I can use this to come in and add, a little more precision to certain elements. So now I've gone through and just, added these Z-spheres in here. And this is basically just me manipulating the Z-spheres along the surface. Now, after I have these, I can now apply them to my model. So I can come over here and we go back to that stroke palette. I can copy this Z-sphere chain, and that's going to copy that result. I can go to my mesh again, can hide my Z-sphere. And now after I have my mesh selected, I can go to Tool or Stroke and do Create Curve. I want to turn Append New off. So this will allow you to append the curve onto a new subtool by an automatic process, or you can append it to the current one. So I want to append it to the current tool, so I just turn that off. And now if I hit Create Curve, you're seeing now it's going to generate a curve where that Z-sphere positioning was. So no matter what I did with that Z-sphere, wrapped it around, the curve's now going to follow it. I can now switch back to my insert mesh brush that I created initially, which was that chain. I can change my focal size, draw size back to 50, and now click on the chain or the curve, and now I have that chain generating. So one more quick time here. Here's another Z-sphere that I've generated, and this one's kind of going around her hand here. So I'm going to select that one, come back to Stroke, copy that Z-sphere chain, and then I'm going to go back to another tool. This one's just a tool that is just a polygon cube. It's in the middle of the base there. Now I'm going to hide my Z-sphere, go to Stroke, do Create Curve. You can see it's creating a curve right along where that Z-sphere was. Now I can simply click, and I've got that other chain created. So another little handy thing there in 2021.5 for manipulating any sort of IMM curves. And this one's a big one for, you know, just any areas you want. It's a lot easier to come through sometimes and manipulate a Z-sphere, because you can get that Z-sphere exactly where you want it, especially if you're going to generate knots, all sorts of different aspects on your models. And then that was the end result there, and then Space Mouse. All right.
Making dark art. People want to use the dark side of you.
It's cold now. It's winter time. It's when dark Joseph comes out.
Hibernation Joseph. All right. So I wanted to actually show something too with dynamics that was chirping up in the chat from Joseph and Michael, where you've been talking about dynamics. I want to show something really quick before we kick it back to Michael. So someone was asking about the stretching of the polygons. Again, Joseph was using just a strip of polygons with micro polys, right? You can do that same thing with nano meshes as well. And nano mesh don't look at the stretching of the polygon, number one. You can control that and have them do that. But the big thing I want to point out is when you guys are using dynamics, where's my mouse? There it is. Okay, so I just got this plane here, right? And I'm just gonna dock really quick in here. Or asking. So I just got pretty much the defaults, okay? So there's your collision volume. I saw someone just asked in chat the collision gap that's happening. I'm assuming that's what you're asking. That's controlled by this slider right here, this inflate. So if you make this inflate lower, when the mesh collides, it'll be closer to the surface. So I'll do it here so you can also see it. So right now I'm just default. I'm pretty much default right now. So when you guys do this, all right, if I start now running simulation and then boom, yes, perfect. Okay, and then let's say I'll do even a mask now and then run the simulation. You can see that this is still falling. But the one thing I want you guys to pay attention to is there's no change in the topology length, in essence. So that plane, I started this big and it is this big. It's not changing. It's staying stagnant what it is. This is going to help you guys with that question you're asking about the stretching. If you do this, so here, let me stop this. And what exactly did I do is I stored a morph target. Okay, so if you don't have a morph target, we do the exact same thing. Yes, collide. We'll mask it again and then run the simulation. You'll see that without a morph target, this thing will keep getting longer and longer and longer because the simulations keep happening and happening and happening. So storing a morph target would be a way to go for you guys, okay? So this is important to understand. This is important to work with your dynamics, okay? The other thing that's gonna help with less stretching for you all is upping your simulation iterations a little bit. Now, don't go crazy maybe. It depends on the mesh, you know, do a little bit at a time. The more iterations you're having to your simulation, the more ZBrush is trying to try and keep what's being deformed nice and set there, okay? So storing a morph target would be number one thing for you all, okay? And your simulation iteration. So back to this inflate, if I change it to say something like 0.2 now, whenever you change anything in this little menu in the dynamics, we'll recalculate the volume, all right? And then we run the simulation and I'll stop. And you can see now the plane's pretty much sitting closer. And right now I'm using a dynamics, right? And so even sticking with what Joseph was doing, we can throw something on this. And then I've even got thickness. So if we turn off the thickness, you can see how close this is now, right? So that gap between this little cloth and his head is a lot closer, right? So if we go back on let's throw that micro poly back on. That looks good. Let's use this one this time. Okay, so if I go no thickness again, and we put this back to the default of 1, okay, it's now recalculated. I run my simulation. You can see your gap, see how much bigger it is. So I don't know if that's what the person was asking, but that's how you can control the dynamic in essence. And this is for anything, even what Joseph was showing. If you wanted those chains to be closer, let's say you're an artist that needs to 3D print something, you might want that inflate really low so that when you make the change, they're already intersecting with the surface, and that's perfect for 3D printing. So it all comes down to what you're trying to do, right? So number 1 tip here, morph target will help so you don't stretch out, okay? And then your simulation iterations, okay? So I want to kick it back to Mr. Michael Popovich, and I'll continue with Joseph answering questions throughout the chat. So Michael, I hand it off to you.
Thank you. Cool. I'm going to throw this back. Everybody get your quick ears on. I'm going to throw this back to what we were talking about earlier. Paul was going over how to kind of copy things from another place to another. One of my favorites is under Subtool Master. There's a copy folder and a paste folder. So if you have a folder of stuff, you can copy that folder, go to another subtool, paste that folder, and you're good to go. And also another thing too that keeps coming up is, going to the Z Classroom and, I wish I had all this stuff in one place. On my YouTube channel, I'm not trying to show myself, but on my YouTube channel, on my ArtStation page, anytime there's a new release of ZBrush, and I do this for you guys, ZBrush 4R8, what's new, 2018, 2019, 2021, 2020, what's new. All you got to do is go in here. There's like 8 hours worth of ZBrush 2021, what's new. And I'm going to, of course, add these videos to this, but here's like 63 videos on a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. So Z Classroom's got some really good stuff. If you like listening to my voice and don't mind slowing me down on YouTube, you can give that a shot as well as a supplementary. To hop into here, we got kind of a hard surface robot here, and this is all 100% ZBrush, and this is like the kitchen sink of ZBrush thrown at this thing. I was just trying a bunch of different techniques. What I can do is I'm going to narrow this down. I'm just going to grab the shoulder pad here. I'm going to tap X to go out of X symmetry and just grab this side here. Geometry, modify, topology, delete, hidden, and that's here. So this is why I use a custom menu. You have very quick access to things I use all the time. If I use it all the time, hotkey. If I use it a lot, custom menu, custom interface. If I use it every once in a while, lightbox. So, very quickly you can go through here instead of having to dig through the menus all the time. But here's geometry, modify, topology, delete, hidden. So we have our thing here, and I'll just do it over here. Dynamesh, and we'll crank this Dynamesh resolution up, blur off, and we'll turn Dynamesh on for this little shoulder piece here. So, and also turn this off. So, looking at the use of thick skin, using thick skin in conjunction with like maybe more of a hard surface object is what I was trying to get out of working on this. So what I'm going to do is go down here to thick skin, and before I turn that on, there was a question about like using the morph workflow. So if we go down here to morph target, you can store a morph target and then use things like the BLA, the layer brush, and you can use the layer brush to kind of build up here, or hold down Alt, and then you can let go and continue to build up. Of course, when you change your brush size, it's going to build up more or less. So the cool thing about the new thickness workflow is you don't have to rely on morph targets or just using a layer brush. In fact, we can just delete that morph target, and then back here underneath thick skin, I'm going to pop in maybe a thick skin of 7, and you can use any brush. In fact, you don't even have to use, like, if I go in here, like my clay buildup brush, and be like, okay, that's taking this and again pushing that out and capping it. I go in here to like my standard brush, and just dial in a certain amount and hold down Shift, and then we're just going to, because we have underneath the stroke menu here, that lazy radius is turned on. You can use L to toggle that on and off. You can go through here, and just start adding some hard surface detail, and you can use thick skin. Now, I didn't reach the cap. The cap is set at 5-ish, it looks like, and I didn't quite get there. Well, if you remember, underneath stroke here, you have a modifiers replay last. If I hover over this, so anything in ZBrush is like its own help menu. You can hover over it, you can see the name, the hotkey, which is 1, hold down Control, you get even more information. So you don't have to go digging through documentation, it's just sitting right there in your face, hold down Control, there's more stuff. So again, go through here, use your standard brush. Okay, I didn't hit my cap. All I got to do is just hit 1 or hold down 1, and it'll go ahead and just pop that out. You can also go up here to your undo history slider and just slide that back and forth. So you can go through here and just dial in that amount you need. And because we have thick skin turned on, I can, again, just keep adding to this. Just hit 1 to go ahead and add that. Go to another brush, maybe clay buildup, maybe build up here, maybe build up here. And you know, I've got this kind of hard surface concepting ready to go. And again, you can do that with the clay brush here. Let's go ahead and turn off RGB. Let's make sure that our lazy radius is on. Again, let's take the stroke menu and throw it over here. So we have L, again, lazy mouse on and off, lazy radius down. And so we can go through here and use my clay brush. We'll go around this corner here. So here's a clay brush. Let's hold down Alt this time. And then again, just 1, all the way down. If I want to, I can continue to hit 1 just to kind of keep digging that in. I can also go in here and change the thickness dynamically. So we can say, you know what, let's set that to like 9. And then if we want to kind of have a layered effect, just go through here, hold down Alt, let go, just dial that in with 1, and there you go. So you've got those kind of punched in there. And then again, if you don't like this, you can take this thick skin down to 0 and just go back in here with clay buildup or whatever, and just gone and start over again. So again, that clay thick skin is storing, as long as you don't re-dynamesh or anything, it's storing these vert positions that you can always go back to. So for example, you can go through here again with the standard brush. I'm just going to do, let's give ourselves a little bit of leeway here. We'll put that back to 7. So I'm going to go through here and just going to do a quick soft stroke and then just hit 1 to kind of just replay that. And you know what? I can go back in here and just dial that in exactly where I want it. If I turn thick skin off and then back on again, it's going to store those vert positions. So now I can go through here. I can add like a little ridge. Let's do this. Soften that out a little bit. Go back in here with my standard brush. We'll add a little ridge here, and we'll go ahead and pop that out. And if that's too much, don't worry about it. All you got to do is just go back in here and say, you know what? I think maybe 4 is a little bit more appropriate. Oops, there we go. So 4, we'll dial that in, and then bing, there you go. So now, and also Alt, you can hold down Alt and hold down Shift, and that lazy mouse is what's allowing me to kind of hold down Shift and snap it to that line. Of course, there's other cool things you can do in here. There's like the backtrack stroke. You can like snap the track, turn it into a line, and you can use this to kind of constrain your stroke. But you can also just hold down Shift, boom, or hold down Alt, Shift, boom, and just dial that in. And again, that thickness there, if we go here to our, let's see, brush BC, and then chisel brushes, you can go through here, and you're going to see it's kind of capping that brush out. If we turn off thick skin and we choose like one of these deeper ones, you can go through here and it'll kind of dig in. You can hold down Alt, let's turn off RGB, and it'll pull out. Turn on thick skin, set it to a distance, and now when you dig in, it's going to cap it down there. Hold down Alt and cap that. And speaking of, since we were talking about this earlier, let's go ahead and turn off thick skin. If you store a morph target and you use these brushes, you can drag through and let go and drag through, and it'll go ahead and resolve that, so you get a very nice effect. And there's other also stuff in here like go and find it, but basically, oh, there it is. Curve snap distance. It's one of these things where it'll go ahead and snap. There it is, lazy snap. So it'll go ahead and snap to your last point. You can set the brush size so that it stays nice. And let's go ahead and see. Lazy step here, lazy radius down a bit, lazy snap. So as I kind of drag through here and let go and then continue to drag, it'll snap back to that exact point that I left off at. So go through here and you can go through and use that as well. So a couple of different techniques you can use, but also don't forget, you can also go in here just with your standard brush with thick skin turned on. You don't have to like use repeat last. You can just go through here, add more detail just as you're kind of dragging along, and just add hard surface detail. Go in here and hold down Alt, and eventually it'll cap itself out. Also, with like move brushes. So if I go in here, turn thick skin off, and I use my move brush, of course you can move geometry around. You can also hold down Alt, and that'll pull that move brush along that surface normal. So you can go way out or way in. Of course, we already know if we turn on thick skin, it'll cap that. So it'll go down, and then it'll cap out. So you can use this to kind of put in little screw ports. You can pop them in, pop them out, just kind of up or down, up or down. You can also go back in here, make your brush draw size a little bit smaller, pop that out. So you can get some very cool, quick, hard surface stuff going on there. And if you have pre-existing detail, go into our clay brush here, hold down Shift, hold down Alt, and we'll kind of use the clay brush to kind of pull just a shape along here. Oops, don't move your camera. Shape along here, hit 1, go through there, and that'll add some more complexity along here. And then remember, thickness down to 0, go in here and just clean up any areas. Let's turn off lazy mouse here that you maybe don't like. And then if you want to, you can redynamesh. Once you redynamesh, you're changing those vert positions. So that'll turn that thick skin off because that's a new thick skin at that point. Go in here, soften that out. You can kind of go through here and make your hard surface dreams come true. And another thing, just really quickly, if I go in here, so I can do a quick mirror and weld, and using my custom menu, I can do a deformation mirror and then do a geometry modified topology mirror and weld really quickly. But in lieu of that, what I like to do is do an array mesh, lock position, lock size, reset, X mirror. So now this is just an instance of a mesh. So as I change this one, that one's going to update. So I can go through here, hold down Control Shift, clip curve, and then I can just clip this side. This side's fine. If it's in the way, if I'm making boots and it's like, this one, I need it out of my way, just turn array mesh off. Go through here, do whatever you need to do. And again, just turn array mesh on as needed there. And Joseph Dress already did a really good job on the curves helper, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But I will bring up one thing that I've done on this one. So for example, if we go through here, this Z-sphere, it's got a root and then it goes all the way out to a tip, and then you have another offshoot right here. So if you have a complex Z-sphere chain, it'll work just fine. So if we go in here to our, oops, it's under our stroke menu, sorry about that. Not tool, stroke. There we go. And then tool, we want over here. So under our stroke menu here, you're going to see we have curves helper. So right now I can copy the Z-sphere chain, and then I can go ahead and say create curve, and that'll go ahead and you can either have a mesh down here that you want to append that curve to, or you can just have it create a mesh for you, and that curve is attached to that mesh. Underneath your stroke options here, you have some curve functions. And right here, you're going to see there's a smooth option here. So let's go back here to our tool menu here. So we have this, and we have our curve selected, and then we've copied the Z-sphere chain. We made a new one. So if I go in here to ZBrush insert curve, we can put anything on here. I'm going to hit M, or you can go up here and just select it in your selector, or hit the M key, as in Michael Pavlovich. Grab a necklace link, and then you're going to see here I have available to me this smooth option. So again, if I hover over this, you can see the hotkey is 6. You can hold down Control, and that'll give you more information. But what we're really looking at is 6. So all I need to do is hit 6. Because if I put this on here now, you're going to see it kind of has a bend and a bend and a bend and a bend. If you want to smooth that out, just hit 6. That'll smooth it out for you. Boom, there you go. And you can swap this out on the fly. So brush, insert, you know what, let's do this. ZBrush, insert, army curve, M, bike chain, throw a bike chain on there, make your draw size bigger to do what you want. Another cool thing you can do is under brush curve, there's curved tubes. So on here, I can tap this top one, and again, make my brush size bigger or smaller. You see, it's only going to do this top one. So let's say, you know what, I want this top one to be a little bit thicker than the other two. So I'll just use my tap S to grab my draw size, or you can go up here and just change that draw size here, and boom, you can dial that in as needed. And then once you want to tap another one, go over here to where it says snapshot. So you can hit the 5 key, and that'll go ahead and hit, well, you can hit 5, and that's going to store a snapshot. And then you can tap this one, and you can make this one actually a different diameter. So you can use complex curves to go through here and do that. So now if you want to, you can go through here, you can say delete to delete that curve. You can hold down Control to unmask everything, hold down Control Shift, go back to select rectangle, and then we can just say, I always use my custom menu, split hidden. So now this is our own, and then do a quick geometry modified topology mirror and weld. You guys can dig around in here and find out exactly where that is. But again, if you use it a lot, throw it in your custom menu, a lot faster access. So that's the basics of that one. Do you guys want me to hop right into the next one, or do you want me to pause here? Go on.
Keep going.
Alrighty.
Keep going.
We're muted. We're muted. We have to mute ourselves in order to talk. Keep going. Keep the rhythm.
Delete all. I'm going to delete all that stuff out of here. Oh, and by the way, so here's the final render of this. And because ZBrush has underneath draw here, they have a new real camera here, so you can set the focal length. So I was able to go through ZBrush renders and keyshot renders together and match this up. So, you know, you got the robot guy all posed out here, and he's got the emissive glow, and then taking some ZBrush renders and kind of making that a little bit cooler. So here we'll go into, and this one will be a quick one because we've already covered quite a bit of this. So here's my Artemis statue. And if I go down here to thick skin, wherever that is, let's see. Oh, you're going to see thick skin's already turned on. So I've already and I've saved this. I did this weeks ago, and then I just loaded the Z tool. So it still has that stored in memory. I haven't changed the vert order. So at any point, I can go in here with any brush. I can turn this down to 0. I can go through here and I can just wipe back to my original mesh. Just kind of a posed out base body with a couple just quick cloth and quick brushing, basically. So again, if I set this to say like 1.5, I go in here to like brush thick, and I believe this one will ship with it, thick clay. And this is one Joseph was kind of playing around with. Let's go ahead and really quickly, I'm just going to swap out Skin Shader 4, maybe drop in a little bit of a light color. And you're going to see, I can't really see that well. So let's go in here to our render, preview AO, turn on a little bit of that preview AO, maybe we can crank it up a little bit so we can see a little bit better how our sculpt's going to turn out. So I'd use this brush, again, just to kind of give it the illusion of kind of a quick, kind of block out. You're getting your forms in there. Maybe you've been a little bit messy with your clay. And again, really quickly, just going in here and dialing in kind of your rough forms. And then if you want to kind of make it look like it's going to be cleaned up a little bit, we'll swap back over here to our clay buildup. And instead of just going through here and just clay building up back to the original, I'm going to swap this alpha out to like this rake type of alpha. So I can go through here and I can very quickly, kind of follow the forms of my face. And again, just kind of get this, I'm slowly refining this mesh back to the original, but I'm doing it in a way that you would do traditionally. You would go through here, you do these little half moon kind of rakes to kind of even out the mesh, make sure your mesh is nice and smooth as you're going. So this is what your clay mesh would look like after you've taken the rake to it to kind of even out your forms. So again, just kind of go through here and get that going. And then again, once you want to go through and say, okay, now I'm ready to get that final result in here after I'm done raking, that's when I could probably go back to clay buildup, swap back out that alpha, and then very quickly, I just kind of go through here, and you can hold down Alt and let go of Alt, hold down Alt. You can kind of push in and pull out. Again, it's limiting it to that 1.5, and now you can kind of go around and kind of start. It's like you're taking your thumb and just kind of smoothing out some areas here. So as you're going through, you can kind of just build up, hold down Alt and let go of Alt, just kind of build up that nice kind of clay buildup look like you're taking your thumb and kind of smoothing it over those rakes to get that result. And again, if you want to shoot that over using ZBrush Bridge, that would be underneath your render menu. Just say external render key shot. And if you have key shot loaded up, you can do some renders here. You put in a little back plate, you throw on some lighting, you even do a little bit of depth of field, and you can have like, oh, there's my little clay render. Here it is with the little Siobhan NSP type look. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to cover too, just really quickly. And then this one is like a lost wax, basically using, I guess I can load that file up. Here's the bronze shell using live Boolean. I basically just took this, used a inflate, and then I decontrasted it, and then I went through and just used live Boolean to slice this up. So it looks like, here's the bronze statue. I guess we can get rid of these here because those don't really make sense in this instance. And there you go. And then there was another brush, these little blobs down here. All that is if I append a Z-sphere here, and then down underneath our Z-sphere options, let's go ahead and turn on polyframe and turn off line. So we have at the very bottom, I appended it, so it's stuck there at the very bottom. We have our Z-sphere here, and then we have Z-sketch. So you can turn on edit sketch, and now you can literally just go through here and kind of just sketch on little blobs. So I went around her feet. I threw some blobs over here. If you want to throw some blobs here or on her, if you want to just kind of put some clay blobs here, just go through and just use Z-sketch to kind of go through and blob it out. And then once you're ready, you can go in here to unified skin, preview your unified skin. There's a little preview of what your mesh is going to look like. Go ahead and say make unified skin, and then we'll go in here and say append that skin Z-sphere. You can delete the Z-sphere. We don't need that anymore. And now this is basically just clay. You can go through here with like your clay buildup. And, this gets brought up every once in a while, but using like brush snake BSH, and then holding down Alt, you can kind of pull that along the surface of your mesh. And, that's obviously a little bit better with Sculptris Pro. So, go nuts with your fake maquette modeling that we have there. I think that's it. That's all I got.
Excellent. Okay, I would just show one more thing actually from what was coming through in the chat. as well. So again, somebody was asking some questions more about the Sculptris Pro things, items like that, and the AO. Again, the AO is in real time. So right now I have the AO turned on, okay? And like Joseph showed, you're gonna be able to adjust it. But the big thing again to understand about this Sculptris Pro now ability that you guys are gonna have in the next version is you just pick a section that you wanna work on. So like Joseph said, I think the best way to do that is think about this as HD, right? Topology in a way. So I can just pick and choose where I wanna work, right? I can narrow down and get everything in where I want it to be, okay? And then now, if you throw on Sculptris Pro, you're just sculpting. And you can see the AO is automatically updating. And I'm getting clean, repeatable strokes, no problem to going through here and keep adding more detail. And you can see, I'm just adding more polygons here, right? And you can see when I turn on wireframe mode, just looking to see how well the stream's showing it to you guys, you can see the tessellation happening, right? And then if you're switching to like a different brush, which we're all very excited and like to use, the Damien standard brush, right? And of course, the smaller you go, the more details you're gonna start to get. And you can see with this new addition, on top of the AO, you can really see what you're doing with the model, right? So this is where I would start to go and start putting some more defined wrinkling through this little face gorilla, and then having the AO. So like if we turn the AO off, right, let's dock this over here so I don't have an empty spot. You can see the difference. There's with off and on. And like what Joseph said, there's multiple settings, right? Me, I like having a little bit of a blur to my AO, not a lot. So this is a great way for you guys to work now, is just slightly just pick an area that you want to work on. And if you want an AO on, you can, and then you have that in real time. So I found that a nice workflow for you to pick and choose where you want to go. And again, taking a lot of features that we already have in ZBrush, remeshing this, I would use what I showed at the summit, which is near and dear to me with my workflow, is using the new ability to project with actually your history. So I would just remesh this model, and I don't make copies anymore. I like to use that a lot, okay? So this is a really fun way of working now, and I just wanted to again highlight, make sure people understood that. It's about Sculptris Pro now is you can select a portion and go crazy, and your polygon limit is based upon your system and then how much of the mesh you're actually showing now. Okay, so it's not anymore where it's looking at the entire mesh. You can actually narrow down to an area that you really want to focus on. As you can see, this guy's face is really the only thing that's got much going on. If you turn on polyframe mode, right, you can see this was made with Sculptris Pro, but now that I have the ability to hone in.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose Paul? We might have lost Paul. See if he comes back.
Shoot, I ran out of demo models. I just cleared my ZBrush.
There he is. He's back. He's back.
I'm back. Oh, it's Frosty the Snowman. I was Frosty the Snowman there for a moment. Right? So I know that was a lot to unpack, right, for people to understand everything. So of course, like always, these are being recorded, okay, for you all. So you can go back and watch that. And like Michael was sharing his ArtStation that has links to all the videos, the 4 billion videos that he's done along. And then your man below here is the official Ask ZBrush guy. I'm just up close to 1,000, I think, videos now, right?
I need to update it. I've been busy with all this stuff. I need to get back on track. Yeah.
So I want to highlight a couple more things here for you all and give you a couple announcements as well. So I'm going to share my screen again. There's some things we want to make sure you guys are aware of, all right, and have an understanding. Okay, so number one, we just covered a lot of features, right? So we were really trying to take a snapshot of what we've done the last 12 months inside of just ZBrush. Don't forget there's ZBrush Core, there's ZBrush Core Mini as well. So this year alone, we're releasing 2 versions, and I'm considering this next one a big version release, because with thick skin and the AO and the contrasting, they're game changers. And all the Z Modeler editions, I think there's a lot of game changers here for all of you as artists, okay? So these are just some things, some major items that we've done in the last 12 months to ZBrush. So if you're not using ZBrush 2021, you got to get in here with us, right? There's a lot of stuff to unpack. And what we were trying to do, the three of us, was trying to show you guys a little snippets of things here and there that we've done and show you guys really different way to use this, okay? So obviously we're showing things that you don't have yet, which is obviously in our next version, which is ZBrush 2021.5. So this is going to be a patch update. Okay, so you guys are going to be able to update this with your current 2021 version. So be able to just use the Z upgrader. And then I know someone brought it up, that won't change your UIs, your hotkeys. That's the way to do the update. If you don't want any of that to have to change, just use the upgrader. Okay, and then here are just a couple major items that we've covered. Like Michael and Joseph really dove into a lot of thick skin stuff, which is, I love it. It's a big one for me, right? I know Sculptures Pro is a huge one for Mr. Drust. For your 3D printing people, it's changed the way I 3D print big time, right? There's no limitation in essence. Now, who cares if I have it decimated and everything? I just throw Sculptures Pro on now and get some crazy, crazy good stuff. The contrast is another big one. Michael was showing a lot of that with his character with the mask, showing a lot of the contrast variations. You can either have a slider or you can do it by brush bases. The Curves Helper, and that's already available to you now. You can go download that right now. But we're making that an official part of ZBrush because it's just cool to be able to just draw some Z-spheres, boom, have a curve, and you're off and running. Put anything you want. We just finished talking again about the preview AO. We have a lot of Z modeler additions. We have new slicing, polygroup filling holes in this upcoming edition. And then the axis rotation is the ability that you guys are going to be able to rotate in specific degrees and even whatever axis. You can limit it to only the Y, the X, or the Z, right? So that's what the axis rotation is. And then, of course, we now have officially the 3D mouse from Connections is going to be supported officially. And we've also made a default for all these buttons here for them. So they will be updating their driver shortly that will have those default settings that we've made that we found was really useful for using this mouse. You saw Joseph and Michael were using it a lot during this presentation as well. Okay, so obviously for you guys, and everyone has been saying, when's it coming out? When's it coming out, right? When is the release date going to happen? Okay, so again, this is a patch, so you'll be able to just get this when you go and do your updater and go into your program files and Z upgrader. Okay, there also, of course, will be a full install of this, so you'll be able to have a full install. So again, those features that I just highlighted in the previous slide are the major items. There's also been a lot of speed and performance. We are constantly looking at how we can make ZBrush even work faster and have a faster sculpting experience. So 2021 was a big addition. We did even more again with this version, okay? So when will this be released? I have no idea because the slide's broken. Just kidding. It's going to be available tomorrow. Okay, so you guys are going to be able to get all this stuff tomorrow.
And I've got information coming in, Paul.
Okay, go.
11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time tomorrow.
There you go. You got down to the time now.
I got down to the time. And wait.
Oh.
And it's going to be a free upgrade again. So if you don't have a copy of ZBrush, go ahead, get it now. You can upgrade tomorrow to 2021.5 for free.
It's like you're a traffic controller.
I am. They just keep feeding me information. What? Tell Paul no? Tell Paul no.
Right? So again, people, you're going to be going back to this, don't forget about what you're getting in this version. These are just some of the highlights again, what you're going to be getting tomorrow on your system. Okay, you can either do a full install or you can do the patch. The system, ZBrush itself, when we launch it, so you guys know, when's it out? The program now tells you guys when there's an update. So if you're in the most recent version, which is 2021.1.2, right now it's not going to tell you there's an update. When we put this out to you all, it's going to tell you, hey, go get the new version. Okay? So I don't know if there was any questions that I missed as I was talking there, boys. Did I miss anything?
I think you're good.
I think we're good. All right, so we'll go back to full camera, and this has been a lot of fun, I know, for me. Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I know Joseph took a lot of your time. He just kept talking and talking.
I even lost the connection there for a little bit. You guys tried to stop me.
It was a knock at the door. Hey, go. Michael's turn. Michael's turn.
That's okay. I went to 5x speed that time.
Yeah. You got to speed her up a little, right? Well, I want to say thank you to everybody. Have an amazing holiday. Please be safe. This has been great. I'm really excited to see what you all do with these next additions to ZBrush. There's so many ways to use it. And hopefully this is what they were trying to show you guys today too. Like Michael's really trying to show you and Joe's really trying to show you different ways of using the features, right? And I know, Michael, you're working on some videos for this version as well, correct?
Yeah, and I want to reemphasize that too. Like O'Farah said at the very beginning, I learn a lot from them. So I'll do my thing and I'll be like, oh, this is kind of what I use it for. And then they'll come back, the audience will come back with something where it's like, I'm on ZBrush Central and I'm like, whoa, I didn't even think about that. So please take what we showed you here and run with it and just show us what you got, because I love learning from you guys.
It's a cycle of inspiration. Keeps growing.
Exactly.
Well, happy holidays to everyone, all the artists out there.
All right. So thank you all, everybody. I'm Paul Gabriel. We've got Michael Popovich and we got Joseph Drust. Thank you all for watching our special stream on the development of ZBrush 2021 for the calendar year of 2020. Have a delicious day.
Bye, guys.
Take care.